Chapter 522. Nie Tian took a step forward as his aura surged. The surging sword intent he emitted almost filled the entire banquet hall. In his eyes, a cold light flashed, overbearing. Since you, Yao Fei, think that the lives of a few ordinary girls are cheap, then I'll let you understand that no one's life is cheap. It's just that you think you're high and mighty. Everyone could feel the sharp sword intent in the air, and their faces were all aghast. They couldn't believe that a teenager could condense such a terrifying sword intent. Moreover, no one thought that Nie Tian, who was only at the first rank of True Essence Realm, would take the initiative to challenge Yao Fei Ku, a 6th-rank spiritual array master. Yao Fei Ku's brows furrowed as his expression became hesitant. Others might not know Nie Tian's strength, but he was very clear about it. Half a year ago, in the Chaos Abyss, Nie Tian had stepped onto the Rising Dragon arena and slaughtered a dragon with a single sword strike. He had even withstood the attack of the Afterscar Eye, a preternatural pupil, head-on. His strength was heaven-defying, and it had refreshed everyone's understanding of the martial Tao. At that time, Nie Tian was only at the 4th rank of Giant Spirit Realm. In just half a year, his strength had risen to the 1st rank of True Essence Realm. If it was a fight to the death, Yao Fei Ku didn't have the confidence to defeat Nie Tian. What? Are you scared? Seeing Yao Fei's hesitation, Nie Tian let out a cold, provocative laugh. Afraid? Yao Fei Ku retorted and pretended to be calm. This master is a 9th-rank spiritual array master. Why would I be afraid of a mere 1st-rank True Essence Realm swordsman? I'm afraid that if this matter spreads out, people will say that I'm bullying the weak. Nie Tian smiled in contempt. I didn't think that Master Yao not only has great attainments in spiritual array, but also has a sharp tongue. You really know how to find a way out of this embarrassing situation. Yao Fei Ku was obviously afraid. Not only was he afraid of Nie Tian's strength, but he was also afraid of offending the people behind Nie Tian, such as frenzied Blade Yi Linyun. Martial uncle, save me! Wang Haoshuan noticed Yao Fei's hesitation, and he actually threw himself down by the latter's feet and begged bitterly. He didn't seem like a crown prince in the slightest, and he was completely like a dead dog. Yao Fei thought for a moment and said, Nie Tian, you and I will decide victory or defeat in one move. If I win, you will spare His Highness the Crown Prince's life. If I lose, I will no longer meddle in this matter. What do you think? Nie Tianling snorted and said mockingly, Grandmaster Yao has a good plan. If I win, the result will remain the same, and I will still kill Wang Haoshuan, which is equivalent to not obtaining anything. However, if you win, you will be saving Wang Haoshuan's life. Do you think such a bet is fair? Nie Tian would only be able to kill Wang Haoshuan if he won, which was equivalent to obtaining nothing. This was clearly not enough to satisfy him. Then what do you want? Yao Fei Ku asked solemnly. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth curved into a slight smile. He sized up Yao Fei Ku and said, Grandmaster Yao, I see that the rank 5 spiritual formation on your body is not bad. If I win, you will give this rank 5 spiritual formation to me. How about it? Yao Fei Ku had set up a rank 5 spiritual formation on his body, which was enough to withstand the attack of a low-leveled spirit wheel stage warrior. It was very good, and it would be good if he could win. Yao Fei Ku was slightly stunned. His eyes flickered for a moment. This rank 5 spiritual formation was his life-saving measure, and he spent a total of 5 years to set it up. During this period of time, he didn't know how many failures he had gone through and how many spiritual materials he had wasted. Its value was no small matter. Nie Tian's eyes were really good, to be able to see the rank 5 spiritual formation at a glance. Yao Fei Ku lowered his head and looked at Wang Haoshuan, who was crawling beside his feet. He hardened his heart and said loudly, All right. This Grandmaster agrees. After he finished speaking, he took a step forward. His body shook slightly and a white ray of light shot out. A circular trajectory with a diameter of 10 meters appeared on the ground, and it just happened to wrap around him and Nie Tian. Yao Fei Ku said directly, "You and I will decide the winner with one move. Whoever steps out of this circle or is closer to the edge of the circle will lose." Nie Tian turned around to take a look. At this moment, he and Yao Fei Ku were 1 meter apart. Both of them were about 4 to 5 meters away from the edge of the circle. When the next move was made, both of them would definitely have to retreat. Whoever retreated the most would lose. This kind of competition was still considered fair. However, Yao Fei was a wily old fox. He thought of such a way of winning and losing, and he was practically in an invincible position. He had a rank 5 spiritual formation protecting his body. Unless Nie Tian was able to unleash the power of a spirit wheel stage warrior, it would be impossible for him to retreat even half a step. There was no lack of smart people at the scene. They could all see that Yao Fei Ku was shameless, but they didn't say anything. "Alright. As you wish, let's do it this way." Even though he knew that Yao Fei could take advantage of him, Nie Tian still agreed straightforwardly. "Very good." The corner of Yao Fei Ku's mouth curled up. His face revealed an unconcealable smile, as if he was already celebrating his victory in advance. With a rank 5 spiritual formation protecting his body, even if Nie Tian had the ability to transcend the heavens, he would definitely not be able to make him retreat even half a step. "Teacher, Yao Fei Ku is cheating." Duanmu Lu also saw through Yao Fei Ku's despicable act. He transmitted a message over to remind Nie Tian. "Brat, don't you trust your teacher that much? Wait and see how I will defeat him." Nie Tian smiled indifferently and transmitted a message to Duanmu Lu. He seemed to be very confident. It was still uncertain who was cheating. The surrounding crowd automatically retreated. The next move to decide the winner would definitely be incomparably powerful. They didn't want to be implicated. "Nie Tian City Lord, make your move." Yao Fei Ku stood firmly with a proud expression. He didn't put Nie Tian in his eyes at all. Nie Tian smiled indifferently. The aura around his body suddenly rose. The surging sword intent became more and more intense. It was as if it had the power to tear the void apart. "Humph, with this kind of power, you want to contend against my 5 elemental spiritual formation? Dream on." Yao Fei Ku sneered in his heart. The 5 elemental spiritual formation revolved around his body. 5 illusory figures appeared in the air: Gold Dragon, Wood Dragon, Water Dragon, Fire Dragon, and Earth Dragon. The 5 little dragons, which were a few meters long, represented the power of the 5 elements. They circulated around Yao Fei Ku's body and formed an indestructible, solid shield. What a strong power! The crowd felt the surging power of the 5 elemental spiritual formation. Their expressions changed. Nie Tian felt the strong power of the 5 elemental spiritual formation. However, he didn't panic at all. Instead, the corner of his mouth curled up into a strange smile. "Mr. Yao, one move to decide the winner." "My move, here it comes." Nie Tian roared. His figure suddenly jumped high into the air. The surging sword intent condensed in the air. A huge sword seal appeared in the air and directly slashed down. "Good move!" Yao Fei Ku shouted. The invisible spiritual formation flashed with golden light. The shield around his body strengthened again. Yao Fei Ku only defended and didn't attack. He was sure that Nie Tian wouldn't be able to break his 5 elemental spiritual formation. In the end, Nie Tian would be injured by the spiritual formation. Boom! The huge sword fell. A layer of dust rose on the ground. However, it didn't cause any damage to the invisible spiritual formation. Yao Fei Ku felt that the sword was weak. It was soft as if it was playing. He frowned. He didn't know what Nie Tian was doing. In the next moment, Nie Tian's figure fell from the sky. His body suddenly took a step forward. Chapter 523. Nie Tian's figure steadily landed, confident and natural. His gaze locked onto Yao Fei the moment his toes touched the ground. With a thick sense of ridicule, he said, "Great Master Yao, one move has passed. You've lost." Yao Fei's body maintained its forward momentum, but he was frozen in midair. The moment Nye Tian took a step forward, he knew that he had been tricked. Great Master Yao lost? Everyone was stunned, unable to react. Just now, Nye Tian's sword had a great momentum, but it did not have the slightest bit of power. It only stirred up a layer of dust on the ground, and did not shake Yao Fei's 5 elements spirit array in the slightest. The reason why it was like this was because Nye Tian had done it on purpose. He wanted to create a powerful momentum, but he restrained it the moment it reached him. He knew that it was impossible for him to break through the rank 5 protective spirit array, so he might as well not have any ideas about Yao Fei. He just took a step forward and arrived at the center of the circle. Who told Yao Fei to foolishly stand in place without moving? The two agreed that one move would determine the winner. Whoever stepped out of the circle or was closer to the edge of the circle would lose. Nye Tian was currently standing in the center of the circle, so of course he was in an invincible position. This time, Yao Fei was completely tricked by Nye Tian. But he could not say anything because he was the one who set the rules. Nye Tian only tricked him within his rules. Look. Nye Tian is standing in the center of the circle. Doesn't that mean that Great Master Yao is closer to the edge? After a few seconds, someone reacted and screamed. So it's like this. Everyone understood one by one, and their astonished gazes landed on Nye Tian. This guy was too cunning. He grasped the loophole in Yao Fei's words and easily won the gambling mat. Yao Fei's 2 fists were clenched so tightly that they made cracking sounds. His face was livid and purple, and his eyes turned crimson red. He was like a wild beast that was about to explode but could not find a target to vent his anger on. The person who was originally in an invincible position was him. As long as he took a step forward, he would definitely occupy the center position. Unfortunately, he did not think of this at all, allowing Nye Tian to take advantage of the loophole. Nye Tian was really hateful, infuriating, murderous, and terrifying. Looking at the trembling Yao Fei, Nye Tian raised his eyebrows and a playful smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Grandmaster Yao, you are a member of the Spirit Formation Master Guild, the #1 Spirit Formation Master in the 3000 small world. You wouldn't be trying to go back on your word, would you? These words were exactly what Yao Fei had just said. Now that Nye Tian had repeated them, it sounded extremely sarcastic. Yao Fei's body trembled violently. His eyes widened as he looked up at Nye Tian and said slowly, "I, Yao Fei, can afford to lose." Yao Fei's angry voice fell, and a Tier 1 scroll appeared in his hand. He unfurled it in the air, and the 5 elements spirit array that wrapped around his body quickly condensed, turning into a rune that rushed into the spirit array scroll. Nye Tian, the 5 elements spiritual formation scroll is yours. Yao Fei threw the spirit array scroll to Nye Tian, turned around angrily, and almost roared, "Goodbye." Nye Tian took the spirit array scroll and probed it with his divine scent. After confirming that there was no mistake, he quickly put it away. Then, he looked up at Yao Fei's trembling back and laughed loudly. "Grandmaster Yao, you are a true gentleman. Walk slowly or you might fall. I won't be seeing you out." "Martial uncle, save me." Seeing Yao Fei leave, Wang Haoshuan wailed and was about to burst into tears. Nye Tian easily won a rank 5 spiritual formation. He suppressed his excitement and turned his gaze towards Wang Haoshuan. He pointed at the few girls at the banquet who were sobbing and said coldly, "Wang Haoshuan, I left them at the Xian Prince Manor. Is this how you treat them? Tell me, how should I treat you?" The ice-cold voice entered Wang Haoshuan's ears, causing his body to tremble uncontrollably, not daring to speak. "Not going to speak?" A cold smile appeared at the corner of Nye Tian's mouth. He looked at the other people at the banquet with a stern gaze and said coldly, "Tell me, how should I deal with your crown prince?" Feeling the bone-chilling killing intent, everyone's eyes trembled and they lowered their heads. These officials and nobles were still flattering Wang Haoshuan just now, but now they were all silent and couldn't utter a word. "Speak. Whoever doesn't speak, I have one word, die." Nie Tian roared angrily. Didn't these high officials usually flaunt their prowess and put on airs? At the crucial moment, they didn't even know how to speak? The ice-cold killing intent spread out, and everyone's heart trembled. Someone immediately stood up and shouted, "Kill! The Crown Prince deserves to be killed." "Yes, the Crown Prince deserves to be killed. Nie Tian City Lord, the Crown Prince is immoral and went back on his word. He deserves to die. If he doesn't die, the people's anger will not be appeased." The crowd suddenly became lively and spoke one after another, afraid that Nie Tian couldn't hear their voices. Seeing the crowd's anger, Wang Haoshuan's expression almost turned crazy. Because just a moment ago, these people were desperately flattering him, but now they wanted him dead. People's hearts were really vicious. Nie Tianling's cold gaze swept across the crowd and finally fell on Wang Haoshuan. He said calmly, "Your Highness, you heard it all. These people you invited all think that you deserve to be killed. It seems that you really deserve to die. You are heartless and unscrupulous." Wang Haoshuan seemed to wake up from a dream. He suddenly stood up and pointed at the people in the hall and cursed. At this moment, these people were no longer afraid. They all pointed at Wang Haoshuan and cursed back. The whole hall turned into a war of words. "Quiet!" At this time, Nie Tian's overbearing voice sounded, shocking everyone. He said in a cold voice, "Wang Haoshuan, now do you know how much of a failure you've been as the Crown Prince? At the crucial moment, no one spoke up for you. Don't you think you're pathetic and ridiculous?" As his voice fell, Wang Haoshuan looked at the people in front of him who were insulting him. He couldn't bear it anymore. He fell into madness and roared in pain. "Humph! Let me help you get rid of this tragic life," Nie Tian said indifferently, overbearing and cold. Swish! A sword intent attacked, decisive and merciless. A streak of blood shot in the air, and Wang Haoshuan's mad figure fell to the ground. Dead. The Crown Prince of the Great Chu Empire, the future Crown Prince, died miserably just like that. Wang Haoshuan died after being the Crown Prince for a day. Before coming to the Crown Prince's residence, Nie Tian said that Wang Haoshuan's career as the Crown Prince had come to an end. He did what he said. Not only did he end Wang Haoshuan's career as the Crown Prince, but he also ended his life. The crowd looked at Wang Haoshuan's figure falling to the ground. At a certain moment their eyes became obsessed, as if they couldn't believe the scene in front of them. The dignified Crown Prince of the Great Chu was actually killed in the Crown Prince's residence. If they didn't see it with their own eyes, who would dare to believe it? Nie Tian's gaze swept across the hall. When he didn't see a familiar young girl's face, the anger in his eyes rose a little. In the end, the anger in his eyes evolved into piercingly cold, killing intent. Chapter 524. A bunch of scum. Nie Tian glanced at the crowd and scolded coldly, no longer paying attention to them. The Crown Prince died in the residence, and these people were all shouting that the Crown Prince deserved to be killed. If the Emperor of Dechu knew, he would definitely not let these people off. After that, Nie Tian took all the girls away and ransacked the Crown Prince's residence, obtaining another huge amount of wealth. One day later, outside Chuyang City, Nie Tian bid farewell to Zhan Xiaoi and the rest. Zhan Xiaoi was going back to Battle Cloud sect, and originally invited Nie Tian and the rest to go back as guests. However, Nie Tian did not want to trouble himself, and only let Duanmulu and Gu Wuyo go back with Zhan Xiaoi. After all, Duanmulu and Zhan Xiaoi had just become sworn brothers, so it was not bad to keep in touch and improve their friendship. Yesterday, they had brought out a few dozen girls from the Crown Prince residence. Those who had families were given enough origin crystals and allowed them to return home. As for those who were homeless, they followed Zhang Xiaoyi and the rest back to the Battle Cloud sect and were arranged by the Battle Cloud sect. Teacher, we're leaving. Duanmu Lu was reluctant to leave and kept looking back. Nie Tian watched the group of figures gradually disappear and laughed bitterly. Rui Qianyu is gone, Tang 13 and Elder Yi are gone, and Duanmu Lu is gone. I'm all alone again. Being alone was relaxing, and he was at ease. Nie Tian planned to return to Heaven Luo City first. He estimated that the news of his death in the chaotic abyss had already spread throughout the 3,000 small worlds, so it was better to go back as soon as possible, and at least let Qiu Shan and the rest know that he was safe. Half a day later, in the evening, Nie Tian's figure appeared in a forest. He wanted to take a shortcut back, and with his speed, he could return to Heaven Luo City within 10 days. Whoosh! 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 Nie Tian's figure ran madly in the forest, like an agile monkey. His speed was extremely fast, and in a few flashes, he had already covered a distance of a few thousand meters. He had already been running for several hours, but he still did not feel tired. The elemental energy in his body seemed to be endless, as if it would never run out. The 9-star dragon pulse body is indeed abnormal. Even after such a long distance, he can still maintain his yuan power. This is too good. Nie Tian muttered to himself as he dashed forward. At this moment, he suddenly sensed a figure rushing towards him from several hundred meters away. The figure seemed to be in a panic. Nie Tian's figure halted abruptly as his divine sense swept over. In front of him, a 14 or 15-year-old girl in red was running madly. As the red-clothed girl ran, she looked behind her as if she was being chased by someone. When Nie Tian saw the girl's face clearly, he was surprised by her beauty and her strength. The girl in red was about 14 or 15 years old. Her delicate face was still a little immature, but she already had a beauty that could topple cities. Among all the girls that Nie Tian had met, only Mo Rushi, Cher, and Rui Qinyu could be compared to her. What made Nie Tian even more surprised was that this girl was actually at Giant Soul Level 9. At her age, to be at Giant Soul Level 9, her talent was truly abnormal. But this was not the main point that Nie Tian was shocked. The most shocking thing was that the red-clothed girl's mental energy had actually reached level 35. To be able to reach such a level at her age, she could be called a monster. After Nie Tian's strength reached true essence level 1, he had awakened 200 million stars in his body. His mental energy had also reached a terrifying level 51, so he could directly see the red-clothed girl's mental energy. At the age of 14 or 15, she was already at Giant Soul Level 9 and had a level 35 mental energy. This girl's talent was not ordinary. The red-clothed girl's figure was extremely fast, like a burning line of fire, streaking through the forest. This girl's identity is obviously not simple. Why would she appear in this wilderness? Nie Tian frowned, puzzled. Just as he was feeling bewildered, the red-clothed girl also discovered his existence. Her small face revealed an unconcealable joy, and she directly shouted, "What are you still standing there for? Hurry up and save me." "Save you?" Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as he muttered, "Am I very familiar with you?" This little girl was not polite at all, directly ordering Nie Tian around. "Idiot, don't you know how to be a hero saving a beauty?" Seeing Nie Tian standing there like a block of wood, the red-clothed girl anxiously shouted. Just as she finished speaking, a deep voice rang out. "Hero saving a beauty?" With a sneer, a white-clothed figure appeared like a ghost. A pair of deep black eyes emitted a chill that sent chills down one's spine. Cold stared at Nie Tian and said, "With just you, you want to be a hero saving a beauty?" Nie Tian was slightly stunned as he looked at the person who spoke. This was a young man in his mid-20s. His face was delicate and pretty, even more feminine than a woman's. His beautiful appearance could be compared to Gu Qiulong's. However, Gu Qiulong only looked like a woman, but his heart was still masculine. On the other hand, this man was strange, and his entire body emitted a cold and feminine aura. This man's aura was somewhat strange, and Nie Tian actually did not discover his existence just now. One had to know that Nie Tian's current spiritual energy had reached level 51, which was equivalent to a Tier 5 alchemist. He could sense even the slightest movement within 2,000 meters. However, this feminine man was only a few dozen meters away from him. If he hadn't released his aura, Nie Tian wouldn't have been able to detect him. The feminine man's strength was clearly much higher than the red-clothed girl's, but he did not seem to be in a hurry to catch up. Instead, he was toying with the latter like a cat toying with a mouse. At this moment, the feminine man's cold gaze landed on Nie Tian, sizing him up. His eyes were full of contempt, and it was obvious that he did not put Nie Tian in his eyes at all. However, the red-clothed girl saw Nie Tian as a life-saving straw. Her figure flashed, and she came to Nie Tian's side. She directly grabbed his arm and provoked the feminine man, "With him here, don't even think about hurting me." Nie Tian turned his head to look at the red-clothed girl. He was speechless. This little girl really did not treat him as an outsider. The feminine man sized up Nie Tian, and the corner of his mouth raised into a mocking smile. He raised his eyebrows and laughed. "Stinking brat, you're just a trash in the first stage of true essence, and you want to be a hero saving a beauty? You're overestimating yourself. But that's fine, I'm in a good mood today, and I don't mind stepping on an ant." As the feminine and harsh voice fell, Nie Tian's eyes flashed with a trace of coldness. From the beginning to the end, he did not move, and did not even say half a word. It was completely this red-clothed girl and the feminine man who forced him into the position of a hero saving a beauty. However, this was also fine, as Nie Tian wanted to find a suitable opponent to test his current strength. He did not have a good impression of the red-clothed girl, but he did not hate her either. But towards this feminine man, his disgust was oozing from his sweat pores. Chapter 525. Nie Tian took a strong step forward, his whole body brimming with battle intent. Even though he didn't know how strong this feminine man was, he wasn't afraid at all. He had 4 rank 4 astral souls in his body, as well as the chi of the dragon scale and the 5 elements spirit array. Unless this man was a divine wheel realm expert, he had no reason to fear him. Even though this feminine man's strength was strange, it was obviously impossible for him to be a divine wheel realm expert. He was too young, unless he was a monstrous genius like Mou. Oh! The feminine man felt the surging sword intent around Nie Tian, but he wasn't afraid at all. Instead, he smiled playfully and said, "I didn't expect you to be a swordsman who has condensed sword intent. It seems that I have underestimated you." The eyes of the red-clothed girl beside Nie Tian flickered. She was quite shocked by Nie Tian's strength. This little girl found a random person, but she didn't expect to find such a powerful person. "Make your move." Nie Tian didn't want to waste time with the feminine man and said directly. Some people were too arrogant, so he had to be taught a lesson. This guy's original spirit is a bit strange. You have to be careful. The red-clothed girl suddenly whispered in Nie Tian's ear. Nie Tian felt itchy in his ear and couldn't help but frown. "Good. Then this young master will play with you." The feminine man snorted coldly, and a crimson longsword appeared in his hand. With a buzzing sound in the air, an intense sword hum erupted. Dazzling red light was released in waves, and waves of scorching heat filled the space of several hundred meters. "Brat, I only need one sword to let you understand the gap between us." With a sharp shout, the feminine man's longsword soared into the sky. Scorching heat waves came one after another, condensing into a red snake in the air. It opened its huge mouth and attacked Nie Tian. 6th stage of true essence. The moment the feminine man made his move, The circulation of his yuan meridians allowed Nie Tian to sense his true strength. Your aura is strong, but your sword intent isn't enough. Nie Tianling sneered. His sword Annihilation Heavenly Slash was released. The sword light was shocking and the killing intent was intense. The 100-meter sword shadow instantly slashed down. Boom! In midair, the crimson snake collided with the 100-meter-long sword shadow. Dazzling sparks suddenly burst out, and billowing airwaves suddenly surged in all directions. Nie Tian and the feminine man felt their bodies tremble at the same time and took a few steps back. Nie Tian took 3 steps back and steadied himself. As for the feminine man, he took 5 steps back and staggered, almost falling. Without a doubt, in this exchange, Nie Tian firmly held the upper hand. The feminine man's face was pale. His body swayed as if he was going to vomit blood, but he didn't. Nie Tian saw his throat move and immediately knew what was going on. He said with a playful smile, "Your Excellency is really stupid. For the sake of face, you even swallowed the extravasated blood. I admire you." Just now, the feminine man had indeed vomited blood after being struck by Nie Tian's sword, but in order to not lose too much face, he actually forcefully swallowed the blood back. Unfortunately, his actions were discovered by Nie Tian. "Jitingyu, aren't you very powerful? How come you were beaten to the point of vomiting blood? You even swallowed the extravasated blood back. This time, you, the great weirdo of Sumeru's spiritual capital, have really lost face." The red-clothed girl immediately understood and laughed with extreme ridicule. Jitingyu, this was the feminine man's name. Someone from Sumeru's spiritual capital? No wonder he's so strong. Nie Tian's eyes slightly narrowed. It seemed that he had offended a big shot again. And when he heard the name Great Weirdo of Sumeru's spiritual capital, he was even more surprised. Nie Tian remembered that apart from the 3 monstrous geniuses of Sumeru's spiritual capital, there were 3 other weirdos. Tang 13 was one of them. Could it be that this Jitingyu was also one of them? Jitingyu's feminine face momentarily stiffened. He stared at Nie Tian and said in a cold voice, "Stinking brat, you dare to hurt me? Do you know who I am? You're courting death." Jitingyu didn't expect that Nie Tian's strength would be so tyrannical. Obviously, he was only at the first layer of true essence, but he could erupt with more power than a 6th layer of true essence. Moreover, Nie Tian's age was so young. He seemed to be 10 years younger than him. Even Mou and the others couldn't compare to such a freak. "So what if I know who you are?" Nie Tianling sneered and said, "You want to trample me to death, but I can't hurt you. In your eyes, only you can kill me, and I can only stretch out my neck to be killed, right?" It was ridiculous. These young masters were all high and mighty, as if everyone else should be the target of their wanton slaughter. "Yes." Jitingyu roared angrily, giving Nie Tian a positive answer. Nie Tian was slightly stunned, not daring to believe the other's answer. He sneered and said, "Yes, your sister. Ridiculous. Boy, you forced me to do this. If I don't kill you today, I won't be called Jitingyu." Jitingyu was completely furious. The aura of his whole body surged, and the red sword in his hand directly turned into a ball of fire, circulating around his body, faintly condensing into a strange fire array. Waves of array power filled the void. Nie Tian's eyes froze. He actually smelled the aura of demonic fire from the fire array around Jitingyu's body. His body is fused with demonic fire. You have to be careful of this move. Behind him, the red-clothed girl whispered a warning. Sure enough, it's the aura of demonic fire. Nie Tian was shocked. He really didn't expect that Jitingyu's body was actually fused with demonic fire. No wonder he could condense a fire array. Judging from the aura of the demonic fire, it shouldn't be a very strong one. It was estimated that it was a demonic fire below the 100th rank. Demonic fires below the 100th rank were not recorded in the demonic fire diagram, so it was more difficult to find them. It could only be found by chance, not by force. Smelly brat, prepare to die. Jitingyu laughed sinisterly. Clearly, he was full of confidence in his next move. Stand back, Nie Tian said. Although the red-clothed girl was a little unruly, she wasn't a bad person. It was better not to injure her. My name is Meng Xueqing, the red-clothed girl said and hurriedly retreated. Nie Tian's gaze trembled. He seemed to have heard of this name before, but he couldn't recall it at the moment. At this moment of life and death, Nie Tian couldn't be distracted. His entire body's yuan meridians circulated crazily, and his aura began to surge. Fourth grade astral soul, holy hell, heavenly light. Let me see how powerful you are. Nie Tian muttered in his heart. With a thought, the astral soul tablet immediately reacted. An astral soul gushed out, and immediately boundless astral energy surged out. Wow! What a powerful aura! Meng Xueqing felt Nie Tian's aura rushing towards her. That kind of pure energy caused her blood to surge. She began to mutter in her heart, who exactly is this guy? How can he be so strong? He's definitely not someone from Sumeru's spiritual capital. Otherwise, why can't I recognize him? And at the instant the fourth grade astral soul, sacred hell, heavenly light gushed out, Nie Tian suddenly remembered who Meng Xueqing was. Chapter 526. Meng Xueqing, Nie Tian finally remembered this name. It turned out to be the granddaughter of the Alchemist Guild's president, Meng Fanchen. He had heard this name from Gu Yi before. The reason why he paid special attention to it was because of this girl's identity. On the other hand, this girl seemed to be engaged to Tang 13 in the past, but Tang 13 ended up breaking the engagement. Gu Yi had said that Meng Xueqing was not only beautiful and was one of the top 4 beauties of Shumi Spirit City, she was also talented in alchemy and martial arts. Her degree of monstrousness was no less than the top 3 monstrous geniuses of Shumi Spirit City. Tang 13 actually broke the engagement with such a girl. It was indeed strange. Meng Fanchen treated this granddaughter as the apple of his eye and doted on her 1,000 times. Many descendants of the aristocratic families saw Meng Xueqing as their dream lover, but Tang 13 didn't cherish her and took the initiative to break the engagement. Smelly brat, you still dare to be distracted? You're courting death. When Jitingyu saw that Nie Tian was distracted, she let out a shrill cry, and the fire spell formation condensed countless fire snakes in the air. A scorching aura spread out and turned the surrounding 1,000 meters into a furnace. Crackle, crackle. Nie Tian looked down and found that his clothes had been torn apart. His arms couldn't withstand the scorching heat, and blood-red blisters popped up on his arms, which then burst open. What a powerful fire elemental formation! His heart trembled and the power of the 4th-rank star soul, Saint Hell Heavenly Light, burst out. A wave of starlight surged in all directions and forcefully pushed away the scorching hot aura around Nie Tian. Scarlet blood frenzy tide. When Jitingyu saw the situation, she let out a sharp roar, and the power of the fire array formation completely erupted. Countless fire snakes shot out, and scorching heat waves surged out. Bursts of explosions sounded in the air, and it was abnormally terrifying. Careful! Meng Xueqing sensed danger and screamed. The power that Jitingyu burst out was too strong. It was enough to instantly kill any expert below the spirit wheel stage. Nie Tian's guess was right. The demonic fire in his body was the 112th demonic fire on the demonic fire list, Scarlet Blood True Fire. The demonic fire power of the Scarlet Blood True Fire was like blood and flames. Even if Jitingyu wasn't strong enough and couldn't display the full power of the demonic fire, it was enough to make Nie Tian suffer. Powerful! Nie Tian could not help but be shocked when he sensed Jitingyu's aura. However, a strange smile soon appeared on his face. Although his opponent was very strong, he was not to be trifled with. 5 elements spiritual formation, activate. Nie Tian muttered in his heart just as the endless fire snakes were about to attack him. Without hesitation, he activated the 5 elements spiritual array. Ji Tingyu's scarlet blood frenzy was too ferocious. Even if Nie Tian used the dragon scale aura, he could not guarantee that he could withstand it. It was a good time to use the 5 elements spirit formation to test its power. The 5 elemental spirit formation was activated, and 5 illusory figures appeared around Nie Tian: Gold Dragon, Wood Dragon, Water Dragon, Fire Dragon, and Earth Dragon. The power of the 5 elements circulated, forming an indestructible shield that protected Nie Tian. Boom! The scarlet blood frenzy bombarded him. Under the powerful collision, Nie Tian was forced to take a step back. However, at this moment, he directly struck out with his palm. A bright white light rapidly shot out and attacked Ji Tingyu. Ji Tingyu's reaction was extremely fast. Sensing the killing intent, he suddenly turned around and dodged the fatal blow. But even so, his arm was still pierced by the white light. Blood gushed out and half of his body was dyed red. On the other hand, Nie Tian looked indifferent. He calmly patted the dust off his body a few times, and then put away the 5 elements spiritual formation into the spiritual formation scroll. Meng Xueqing, who was watching the battle from the side, was simply dumbfounded. Her small mouth opened so wide that an egg could almost be stuffed inside. She did not react for a long time. She never expected that Nie Tian would actually block Ji Tingyu's demonic fire attack. One had to know that Ji Tingyu was a famous genius in the Shumi spiritual capital. Although he was slightly inferior to Mou and the others, he was definitely a top genius. It was rumored that his Scarlet Blood Truefire was invincible in the Spirit Wheel realm. But why did the Scarlet Blood Truefire lose to Nie Tian, who was only at the first level of True Essence? This made Meng Xueqing puzzled. Nie Tian looked calm, but he was actually quite surprised. This time, it was all thanks to the 5 elements spiritual formation. If not for it, even if he didn't die, he would have lost a layer of skin. Ji Tingyu was indeed a powerful opponent. Even a rank 4-star soul couldn't kill him. Who are you? Ji Tingyu's body surged with blazing hot spirit energy, blocking the wound on his arm. His eyes flashed with a strange light. Just an ant that you don't care about. Is he that important to you? Nie Tian raised his eyebrows, a playful smile hanging on his lips. Just now, Ji Tingyu treated him as an ant that could be casually trampled to death, but now he was concerned about his identity. His attitude had changed a bit. Ji Tingyu heard the ridicule in his words, but he didn't care. His eyes flashed with unwillingness and doubt. He asked, "Why do you have Grandmaster Yao's 5 elements spiritual formation?" Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. He didn't expect Ji Tingyu to be able to see through the spiritual formation on his body. Furthermore, she directly mentioned Yao Fi. It seemed that the two of them had some sort of relationship. "He lost to me, so he gave the spiritual formation to me," Nie Tian answered honestly, but he added, "If I say so, do you believe me?" Nonsense. Ji Tingyu didn't believe him and roared, "Grandmaster, Yao has a rank 6 spiritual formation. Even a spirit wheel stage warrior wouldn't be able to kill him easily. How did you win against him? You must be a thief that stole his 5 elements spiritual formation." Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, "Whatever you say. Anyway, the 5 elements spiritual formation is on me." "Good. We will meet again." Ji Tingyu roared angrily. He didn't dare to stay any longer and immediately turned to leave. Nie Tian didn't chase after him and let him leave. This person's body was fused with demonic fire. If he was forced to stay, even the current Nie Tian didn't have absolute confidence. Moreover, Ji Tingyu dared to have a conflict with Meng Xueqing and even wanted to kill her. Her identity was naturally not simple. Nie Tian didn't want to provoke too many strong enemies. He was in a hurry to return to Tianluo City and couldn't be delayed because of Ji Tingyu. "He's gone," Nie Tianling said coldly as Ji Tingyu's figure disappeared. Humph. Meng Xueqing snorted and said, 3 weirdos, none of them are good. I'm leaving too. Goodbye. Nie Tian's mouth twitched as he prepared to leave. Meng Xueqing wasn't easy to deal with either. It was better not to provoke her. Hey, where are you going? Meng Xueqing wasn't going to let Nie Tian leave. Her figure flashed and blocked his way. Her delicate face revealed a bright smile and said, You saved me. I haven't thanked you yet. There's no need to thank me, Nie Tian replied indifferently. Saving my life is like giving me a new lease on life. Course I have to thank you. Meng Xueqing's words were meaningful. She still didn't let Nie Tian leave. Nie Tian frowned slightly. This little girl's identity wasn't simple. She was the granddaughter of the Alchemist Guild's president. She should be enjoying the best cultivation resources in Sumi Spiritual City, but she appeared near Chaos City. It was a little strange. Chapter 527. Nie Tian wanted to leave, but Meng Xueqing did not intend to let him go. Her quick-witted eyes roamed back and forth over Nie Tian's body. She grinned, revealing the unruly cuteness of a young girl. She said, You're only at the first level of true elemental realm, yet you were able to defeat Ji Tingyu, who possesses the demonic fire. You're truly abnormal. I'm guessing you're from the Mo family, right? No. Nie Tianling replied indifferently. Other than Mo Rushi, he did not have a good impression of the Mo family. Then, are you from the Gu family? Meng Xueqing guessed. No. Nie Tian's impression of the Gu family was neither good nor bad. Previously, there was a Gu Qilin who appeared in Heaven Luo City and was extremely arrogant. However, Gu Qilong was not bad, just that he looked too feminine. Not yet. Meng Xueqing propped up her delicate chin and pursed her lips. Then it must be someone from the Qiu family. Do you hate the Tang family that much? This time, Nie Tian didn't answer Meng Xueqing's question. Instead, he asked her a question. With Nie Tian's talent and strength, it was reasonable for Meng Xueqing to guess that he was from one of the 4 great families. In the 3,000 small worlds, as long as your strength and talent were heaven-defying, everyone's first reaction would be that you were from the 4 great clans. This was a kind of habitual thinking, as if only the 4 great clans could cultivate heaven-defying talents. Meng Xueqing asked the Mo family, Gu family, and Qiu family, but she didn't ask about the Tang family, which was the head of the 4 great families. Obviously, she hated the Tang family a lot. In truth, this was no surprise. In the past, Tang Hao had personally proposed to Meng Fanchen, and only then did Meng Fanchen agree to Tang 13's engagement with Meng Xueqing. However, Tang 13 had wreaked havoc in the Alchemist Guild and destroyed the engagement herself, causing everyone in Sumi Spirit Capital and the 3,000 small worlds to know about it. Even when Tang Hao personally came to apologize, Meng Fanchen still felt uncomfortable. The one who proposed the marriage was the Tang family, and the one who broke off the engagement was also the Tang family. Of course, Meng Fanchen was unhappy. As one of the main characters of this incident, it was easy to imagine how much Meng Xueqing hated the Tang family. Hey, I hate it. Hearing Nie Tian mention the Tang family, Meng Xueqing's face lit up with anger. She fiercely said, It's that Tang 13. He made me a joke in the eyes of others. I want to kill him with my own hands. At this time, Meng Xueqing suddenly realized something and asked in surprise, Are you really from the Tang family? Nie Tian shook his head and said, My surname is Nie. That's good. Meng Xueqing heaved a sigh of relief and solemnly said, It's fine as long as his surname isn't Tang. There's no good person with the surname Tang. Nie Tian smiled bitterly. It seemed that Tang 13's decision to break off the engagement had affected this young lady quite a bit. Why are you here? Nie Tian didn't want to waste time and asked directly. I'm here to find Tang 13. I heard that he died in the chaotic abyss. He better be dead, otherwise I'll kill him with my own hands. Meng Xueqing said angrily. Nie Tian was speechless. Needless to say, Meng Xueqing must have sneaked out behind Meng Fanshan's back. Otherwise, she wouldn't have come here alone. This girl was really fierce. She came all the way from Sumi Ling capital to Chaos City just to confirm whether Tang 13 was dead or not. Her hatred was really strong. However, Nie Tian's next words were likely to hurt her. You don't need to go to the chaotic abyss. Tang 13 has already come out. If I'm not wrong, he should be in Sumi Ling capital now. Nie Tian didn't beat around the bush and said directly. How do you know? Meng Xueqing was surprised. If I said that I came out of the chaotic abyss with him, would you believe me? Nie Tian laughed and asked. I believe you. Unexpectedly, Meng Xueqing nodded and said, I believe everything you say. Nie Tian was speechless. Then he said, Since you believe me, let's go back to Sumi Ling capital. Big brother Nie, come back with me. Meng Xueqing nodded and suddenly said. Nie Tian almost fainted. This girl really wasn't polite at all. It was fine that she saved your life, but she still wanted you to be her guard? That was too much. Big brother Nie, you also saw it. I'm just a weak girl, all alone in this wilderness. What if I meet a weirdo like Ji Tingyu again? Meng Xueqing said as she walked over and hugged Nie Tian's arm, pretending to be pitiful. Nie Tian was speechless. Meng Xueqing's strength was 108,000 times weaker than a weak girl's. Even 100 strong men wouldn't be her match. It was only because she met a freak like Ji Tingyu that she was chased all over the mountain. Why did Ji Tingyu chase you just now? Who is he? Nie Tian became cold and suddenly asked. Ji Tingyu clearly knew Meng Xueqing's identity, but he still chased after her. His identity wasn't simple. Moreover, he could see that the 5 elements spirit formation on Nie Tian's body was Yao Fik. That was even more strange. For this, Meng Xueqing smiled and a fiery red herb appeared in her hand. She said proudly, I found this first. I don't know where Ji Tingyu came from, but he wanted to snatch it. Of course I had to run. Spirit Phoenix Flower. Nie Tian looked at the red herb in front of him and his eyes trembled. He shouted out a name. You know what this is? Meng Xueqing was surprised. She said, I've been in contact with all kinds of herbs since I was young, but I don't even know what kind of flower this is. How do you know? Spirit Phoenix Flower was a 7th grade herb. Its medicinal properties were fierce. If it was refined into a pill, it would greatly enhance a fire attribute martial artist's strength. No wonder Ji Tingyu chased after Meng Xueqing. It was because he wanted the Spirit Phoenix Flower. It's just a wild guess. Nie Tian suppressed the surprise in his heart and laughed dryly. He asked again, Who is Ji Tingyu? Meng Xueqing didn't pursue the matter. She put away the Spirit Phoenix Flower and said, That guy is a weirdo like Tang 13. None of these weirdos are good. Nie Tian waited for her to continue, but the latter only said 2 sentences and didn't continue. What Nie Tian wanted to know was not her anger towards Ji Tingyu, but Ji Tingyu's identity and background. To dare to attack the granddaughter of the Alchemist Guild's president, this Ji Tingyu was definitely not simple. He's from Sumi Spirit Capital, right? Nie Tian was speechless. He could only ask. Meng Xueqing nodded. She finally said, He is the grandson of the Spirit Array Guild's president, Ji Wuxiu. He usually relies on the power of the Spirit Array Guild to be arrogant. I don't know why he suddenly appeared here. The grandson of the Spirit Array Guild's president, no wonder he dared to attack Meng Xueqing. At this moment, Nie Tian also understood why Ji Tingyu could recognize the 5 elements spiritual formation at a glance. She probably knew Yao Fei. He also suddenly remembered that when he was fighting with Ji Tingyu, he couldn't sense the latter's mental strength. Chapter 528. Compared to the Alchemist Guild, the reputation of the Spirit Array Master Guild was slightly weaker. However, its true strength was not much weaker than the latter. However, because spirit array masters were rarer existences than alchemists, the number of people in the Spirit Array Master Guild was even lesser than the Alchemist Guild. However, those who could enter the Spirit Array Master Guild were all powerhouses. Jitingyu was the grandson of the Spirit Array Guild's president. No wonder he wasn't afraid of Meng Xueqing's identity. Did Jitingyu follow me all the way here? Meng Xueqing suddenly thought of something and exclaimed, "This weirdo wouldn't like me, right? That's not right. Doesn't this weirdo like men?" Jitingyu was the same as Tang 13. He was one of Su Mi Ling City's 3 weirdos. However, the reason why he was a weirdo was because his sexual orientation was different from others. As Meng Xueqing had said, Jitingyu liked men. Nie Tian guessed that it was impossible for Jitingyu to have followed Meng Xueqing here. The two of them must have just met by chance. Yao Fei was in the Great Chu Empire, so it wasn't strange for Jitingyu to appear here. Since Jitingyu had already escaped, it was unlikely that she would return. But for safety's sake, Nie Tian was prepared to send Meng Xueqing back to the main road and then return to Heaven Luo City. The two figures quickly exited the forest and arrived at a broad official road. The so-called official roads were the roads built by the sects of the various empires. These roads were usually safer. Meng Xueqing, let's wait here for a moment and see if there are any carriages heading to Su Mi Ling capital. Nie Tian stopped at the intersection of the main road and gazed into the distance. He saw many carriages approaching in a grandiose manner. "Big brother Nie, do you really not want to go to Shumi spiritual capital?" Meng Xueqing pouted, seemingly a little unhappy. "I still have things to do. I really can't go to Su Mi spirit capital." Nie Tian laughed bitterly. He naturally wanted to go to the Shumi spiritual capital because Mo Rushi was there. But now that he was in a hurry to return to Heaven Luo City, Qiu Shan and the others would definitely think that he was dead, especially Nieyuro, Jean Debeo, and the others. No matter what, he should return to Heaven Luo City first. Nie Tian planned to head to Su Mi spirit capital immediately after returning to Heaven Luo City. It had only been a year and a half since his 3-year appointment with MOU, but he still wanted to meet Mo Rushi. If the Mo family did not allow it, he did not mind bringing forward the date of the duel. With Nie Tian's current strength, if it was a life-and-death battle, he could even put up a fight against a warrior at the first tier of the Divine Wheel realm. A moment later, a large group of carriages arrived. Nie Tian saw that all the carriages were heading towards the same road. Clearly, they were all heading to the same place. "Where does that road lead to?" Nie Tian asked as he pointed at the road in the distance. "It seems like it's going to Su Mi spirit capital." Meng Xueqing was a bit uncertain. "Let's go over." Nie Tian did not trust this carefree little girl. He moved and ran over. The two of them came to the wide official road, and Nie Tian saw a road sign in the distance. On it was written, Su Mi Spirit City. Sure enough, it's going to Su Mi Spirit Capital. Nie Tian frowned slightly, feeling puzzled in his heart. So many carriages are going to Su Mi Spirit Capital, did something happen there? At this time, Meng Xueqing seemed to suddenly think of something. She let out a strange cry, scaring Nie Tian. This young lady's behavior had nothing to do with Jing Ruojin, not even half a hair's worth of relationship. "What's wrong now?" Nie Tian asked, speechless. "Big brother Nie, I remember." Meng Xueqing seemed to have discovered a new continent. She excitedly said, "In another month, it will be the decennial Su Mi Grand Gathering. These people are all going to Su Mi Spirit Capital to participate in the Su Mi Grand Gathering." "Su Mi Grand Gathering?" Nie Tian asked, "What do you mean?" This time, it was Meng Xueqing's turn to be speechless. She muttered to herself before explaining, "This is the greatest grand gathering of the 3,000 small worlds. It is only held once every 10 years. During this grand gathering, Su Mi Spirit Capital will have all sorts of competitions. Su Mi Martial Meet, Su Mi Alchemy Competition, Su Mi Artifact Refining Competition, Sumi Spirit Array Competition. At that time, all the geniuses of the 3,000 small worlds will gather together and compete against each other. Moreover, these competitions are all the top competitions of the 3,000 small worlds. Those who can obtain victory in these competitions will obtain all sorts of generous rewards. Moreover, they will receive invitations from various great influences. In the future, they will become truly great figures. Standing at the peak of the 3,000 small worlds, their glory will be limitless. Meng Xueqing spilled everything out in a single breath, white saliva dripping from the corners of her mouth. Nie Tian understood everything clearly and thoroughly. When he looked at a problem, he was always able to hit the nail on the head. On the surface, the Sumi Grand Gathering was a competition between geniuses. But in truth, it was a method for the great influences to select talent. The most important thing was that, in the end, the winners of these competitions would be won over by the great influences. In truth, this was a method to ensure that the great influences would always remain at the peak. Even super influences like the 4 great families couldn't guarantee that they would be able to produce monstrous geniuses. Once a family's strength couldn't be maintained, the family's influence would inevitably be weakened. But the Sumi Grand Gathering could allow these great influences to win over super geniuses and then raise them to make up for the lack of geniuses in their family. Moreover, for these geniuses, being able to join a super influence was also a method to step onto the peak. Both sides would take what they needed, so why not? Are the rewards for every grand gathering very generous? Nie Tian's eyes flashed with a blazing light as he asked. Of course. Meng Xueqing nodded. I don't know about the other rewards, but I heard from my grandfather that for this Sumi alchemy competition, the Alchemist Association is preparing to give the champion the position of an honorary red-clothed elder. Honorary red-clothed elder? Nie Tian's face stiffened. He couldn't help gulping. Honorary red-clothed elder. This reward from the Alchemist Association was just too tempting. Even if it was just an honorary red-clothed elder, it was enough to stand shoulder to shoulder with the inner court elders of the 4 great families. It had to be known that each of the 4 great families only had a few inner court elders. As for the Alchemist Association, there were only 7 honorary red-clothed elders. If one could become an honorary red-clothed elder, they would be able to walk unhindered through the 3,000 small worlds. How is it? Do you think the reward is very generous? This was the first time Meng Xueqing had seen Nie Tian reveal a surprised expression, so she couldn't help but ask in a proud tone. Nie Tian nodded. This reward was not only generous, it was also very tempting. But this isn't the best. If you can win the pill competition, there are even more amazing rewards. Meng Xueqing looked at Nie Tian's expression and suddenly smiled mysteriously. There are even more amazing rewards? Nie Tian was startled. He really couldn't think of any reward more tempting than the position of honorary red-clothed elder. Meng Xueqing paused for a moment, enjoying Nie Tian's stunned expression. Then she slowly said, My grandfather said that the champion of this pill competition can cultivate on the Dan Heart Soul Stone for a month. Moreover, it will be on the Dan Heart Soul Stone itself. Chapter 529. Hearing Meng Xueqing mention the Pillheart Soul Stone, and it was the main body at that, Nie Tian was stunned once more. Pillheart Soul Stone, Nie Tian had heard of it from Gu Yi. It was the Alchemist Guild's most valuable treasure. According to Gu Yi, the Dan Heart Soul Stone was a strange stone that had been passed down since ancient times. It was extremely peculiar, and was formed from the purest spiritual energy. The main body of the Soul Stone was at the Alchemist Guild, while the 7 clones were at the Alchemist Branch, where the red-clothed elder of the Alchemist Guild was. Danwu City's Alchemist Association had a Dan Heart Soul Stone clone, but Nie Tian had never seen it before. Gu Yi said that the Dan Heart Soul Stone could stimulate a martial artist's spiritual force. Within 100 meters of the Soul Stone, a martial artist's spiritual force cultivation speed could increase by 100 times. Moreover, this was the effect that the Soul Stone doppelganger could achieve. If it was the main body of the Dan Hart Soul Stone, it could enhance the cultivation of a martial artist's mental strength by thousands of times. However, there was a limit to the willpower within the Dan Hart Soulstone, so normal people couldn't even get close to it. Even Meng Fanchen, the guild leader, had to get permission from at least 4 of the 7 red-clothed elders before he could get close to it. In this Sumeru pill refining competition, the pill competition champion was actually allowed to directly cultivate on the Dan Hart Soul Stone for a month. This was a fatal temptation for any alchemist. This reward was indeed more impressive than the honorary red-robed elder of the Apothecary Guild. Needless to say, at this moment, Nie Tian was tempted. His current spiritual force had already reached level 51, and even that so-called number 1 spiritual force genius in the 3,000 small worlds, Gu Qiulong, was far from being comparable. The last time he met Gu Qiulong in the Chaos Abyss, Nie Tian didn't know how much mental strength he had, but he estimated that it was around level 40. It was impossible for him to reach level 50 in half a year. The reason why Nie Tian's psychic power was able to increase so quickly was because he had the Origin Star Stone in his body. The awakening of star power would automatically stimulate his psychic power to increase. Although Nie Tian's mental power was already so abnormal that it made people's hair stand on end, Nie Tian still wanted to improve it. His mental strength far surpassed martial artists of the same age, but compared to Gu Yi and some other old monsters, he was still far from it. As long as he could cultivate on top of the Dan Hart Soul Stone for a month, Nie Tian was confident that he could raise his spiritual force to the 60th step. Nie Tian was very clear on how important mental power was to martial artists. Nowadays, martial artists had entered a misconception in their cultivation. They only cultivated their martial strength and not their mental strength. Although it was time-consuming and exhausting for a martial artist to cultivate mental energy in the early stages, the advantages of mental energy would become more obvious in the later stages. A strong mental energy would ensure that a cultivator's cultivation speed would still be very fast when they reached the later stages. "Brother Nie, are you all right?" Meng Xueqing saw that Nie Tian seemed to be in a trance. The corners of his mouth were curled up as if he was plotting something bad. She tugged at his sleeve. "I'm fine." Nie Tian reacted, laughed dryly, and suddenly asked, "Sumeru Assembly, will all the alchemists go?" "Yeah." Meng Xueqing nodded. The Sumeru Assembly is a grand event that occurs once every 10 years. It is a great opportunity for young martial artists. Almost all martial artists with some strength will go. Does the Sumeru Assembly's major competitions have an age limit? Nie Tian asked. Since it was a great competition held by the major influences, not everyone would be allowed to participate. There would definitely be an age limit. Young martial artists under 50 years of age can participate. Meng Xueqing nodded. To an ordinary person, 50 years of age was more than half their life. But to a martial artist, this age was still very young. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they were young. Nie Tian's lips curled up in a smile. He had already made up his mind. He decided not to return to Heaven Luo City, but to Shumi Spirit Capital. Since it was the Sumeru Assembly, Zhang Yifeng would definitely go, and Qiushan would probably also go. Nie Tian remembered that Qiushan was in his 40s. He hadn't exceeded the age limit for the major competitions. Qiushan and Zhang Yifeng would likely bring Nieyuro with them to Heaven Luo City. Moreover, with Nieyuro's temperament, she definitely wouldn't be willing to not bring her along. The Sumeru Assembly, it seems that there will be a fierce struggle between dragons and tigers. It doesn't matter if I go alone. Nie Tian faintly smiled, muttering to himself. Big brother Nie, are you going to participate in the Sumeru Assembly? Meng Xueqing happily asked as she heard Nie Tian's words. Nie Tian firmly nodded. I'll accompany you to Shumi Spirit Capital first. That's great. Meng Xueqing excitedly jumped up, clearly overjoyed. Everyone in front, get out of the way. At this time, a luxurious carriage galloped over. The coachman was extremely arrogant, raising his whip and heavily lashing it on the back of the dragon horse. The dragon horse galloped forward, scaring many of the smaller carriages away. However, at this time, a ragged carriage was leisurely driving along the official road, not sensing any danger at all. Seeing this, Nie Tian was slightly startled. He saw that the coachman on the ragged carriage was a white-haired old man, smoking a pipe and looking as carefree as ever. Boom! In the next moment, the luxurious carriage had already arrived. Like a wild beast that had gone berserk, it charged straight at them. Only now did the ragged carriage react. It wanted to dodge, but it was already too late. Danger! At the critical moment, an explosive shout resounded, and then a strand of sword intent pierced through the sky. It transformed into a large hand in the sky, and it actually directly grabbed the tattered carriage. The luxurious carriage galloped past, kicking up a cloud of dust, but it didn't hit anything. The coachman even turned his head to look at the smoking old man and scolded, "Old thing, consider yourself lucky." After scolding, the luxurious carriage sped away. Nie Tian slightly frowned, not saying anything. He only remembered the coachman's face. There was a slanted knife scar that extended from his forehead to his chin, looking extremely fierce. The ragged carriage slowly descended from the sky and landed steadily. Countless carriages stopped, and all eyes were on Nie Tian. It was him who saved the ragged carriage. If not for Nie Tian's timely action, the ragged carriage would definitely have been smashed into pieces. The smoking old man hurriedly got off the carriage and shouted nervously, Shao, are you all right?" Cough, cough, cough. A few dry coughs came from the carriage. It sounded like a young voice, and then a weak voice said, "Grandpa, I'm fine." Who did we, grandfather and grandson, offend?" the old man said angrily, slapping his thigh. Looking at the old man, Nie Tian's eyebrows furrowed as he realized that he couldn't sense the old man's strength at all. Furthermore, when he tried to sense the old man's psychic power, he felt as if he had fallen into an unfathomable ocean. Chapter 530. This old man's strength shocked Nie Tian. It was obvious that this was not an ordinary old man at all. This person was hiding his strength, but it was unknown what his purpose was. Nie Tian roughly estimated the old man's age. He was at least 300 years old. It was obviously impossible for an ordinary person to have such a long lifespan. "Old man, are you okay?" Nie Tian walked up calmly and asked with concern. The old man glanced at Nie Tian, surprise flashing across his face. He coughed twice and said, "This old man is fine. Thank you for your help just now, little brother." Nie Tian smiled and said, "It's nothing, it was nothing." The old man nodded and climbed up the carriage, saying, "Little brother, we grandfather and grandson still have urgent matters to attend to, so we'll take our leave." Nie Tian took a step forward and directly stopped the carriage. He faintly smiled and said, "Old man, you're going to Shumi Spirit Capital, right?" Seeing Nie Tian stop his carriage, the old man was obviously a little unhappy and stiffly nodded. "We're also going to Shumi Spirit Capital. Old man, how about you give us a ride?" Nie Tian said with a kind face. The old man's face visibly stiffened, and he seemed to become vigilant. But soon after, he relaxed and said with a bitter smile, "Little brother, as you can see, our carriage is really too small, and the old horses that pull it are also useless. We really can't run with you." "Yes, big brother Nie. Look at this horse, it's almost dead. Even if it only pulls the grandfather and grandson, I'm afraid it won't be able to reach Shumi Spirit Capital." Meng Xueqing pointed to the skinny old horse leading the carriage. She even said intimately, "Grandpa, this horse of yours is already dying. It can't reach Shumi Spirit Capital. Later, I'll ask Big Brother Nie to stop a large carriage. Let's go to Shumi Spirit Capital together." Nie Tian was speechless. Meng Xueqing really knew how to speak. She wanted to be a good person, but she wanted him, a laborer, to do the work. Nie Tian looked up and down at the skinny old horse. It was so skinny that it looked as if it would collapse at any moment. The old horse's entire body was black, but there were circles of indistinct yellow patterns on its body. What was a little strange was that the old horse had 2 antlers on its head. They were black and shiny, appearing extremely hard. Humph! Nie Tian inexplicably laughed and said, "Old man, the tiger-striped mystic horn deer is a rank 5 spirit beast. It shouldn't be a problem to carry 2 more people." The old man couldn't hide his surprise when he heard Nie Tian call out old Ma's real name. His face immediately turned gloomy as he asked, "Who the hell are you?" Nie Tian was right. This old horse was not a horse at all, but an extremely rare tiger-striped black antler deer. The tiger-striped mystic antler deer was a 5th-rank spirit beast. It had a docile temperament, but once it was angered, even a true energy boundary martial artist might not be able to subdue it. Furthermore, Nie Tian discovered that there was something special about the carriage, which looked shabby and shabby. The entire body of the carriage was made of the hardest 1,000-year ebony. Even the curtains on the windows were made of an extremely expensive rank 9 sky blue satin. What was even more terrifying was that there was a trace of spirit array power circulating around the carriage. It was actually protected by a spirit array. With Nie Tian's mental strength, he was still unable to detect the grade of this spirit array. His initial estimation was that it was at least rank 4 and above. The tiger-striped mystic horn deer was the leg support, the body of the carriage was made of 1,000-year ebony, the curtains were made of rank 9 sky blue satin, and there was even a rank 4 spirit array for protection. This seemingly worn-out carriage was the most luxurious carriage in the world. Nie Tian's actions just now were purely unnecessary. He did not save the grandfather-grandson pair. He saved the life of the scar-faced coachman. If he did not make a move just now, the one that was smashed into pieces would definitely be that extremely luxurious carriage. This old man was hidden deeply and was definitely an expert. Nie Tian's eyes shone as he looked at the old man and said indifferently, "I'm not your enemy." He guessed that the reason why this old man was so low-key was because he was hiding from someone, an enemy or perhaps an enemy. The old man's hawk-like eyes stared at Nie Tian, trying to find a flaw in the latter's expression. However, all he saw was a pool of clear water. His rational judgment told him that the youth in front of him was not lying. "Grandpa, let him in. It's good to have someone with us, we can take care of each other on the road." While the old man was still hesitating, the young man's voice came from the carriage. However, the old man did not relent. He continued to stare at Nie Tian. The latter said, "Old man, if I were your enemy, I would not have saved you just now. Even if we take 10,000 steps back, and I really was sent here by the enemy, you should feel more at ease keeping me by your side." A cold light flashed across the old man's eyes. He suddenly glanced at Meng Xueqing behind Nie Tian and thought to himself, "This young man should not be lying. If he was sent by that person, he would not have brought a young girl along as a burden. Good. You may enter the carriage." Thinking of this, the old man finally relented. "Hee, it seems this young lady's face is bigger." Meng Xueqing couldn't help but proudly say as she saw the old man agree. Nie Tian could see what the old man was thinking. He thought to himself, "If I were here to kill someone, I wouldn't have brought a burden." How could Meng Xueqing have imagined that the old man regarded her as a burden to Nie Tian? Nie Tian nodded and motioned for Meng Xueqing to enter the carriage first. He and the old man would sit at the front, driving the carriage together. Who knew that as soon as Meng Xueqing entered the carriage, she would let out a strange cry. "What's wrong?" Nie Tian and the old man reacted at the same time. They turned around and opened the curtains. "Grandpa, I'm fine." A youth with a face as pale as paper weakly waved his hand. Nie Tian glanced at Meng Xueqing. The latter smiled awkwardly and said, "His face is too scary." Nie Tian was speechless. He couldn't help but look at the youth again, his brow furrowing slightly. This was a 13 or 14-year-old youth with delicate features. Although he was sitting, one could see that he was tall and had a righteous aura between his eyebrows. However, his face was extremely pale and he was also very thin. One could clearly see the bones of his face. "I'm really sorry for scaring you." The youth didn't blame Meng Xueqing. Instead, he apologized. "Yes, it's my fault." Meng Xueqing awkwardly bowed her head. Nie Tian could see that the youth's complexion wasn't right. Moreover, there was a strange aura coming from his body. This aura was somewhat familiar to Nie Tian, but he couldn't remember where he had seen it before. Nie Tian and the old man returned to the carriage. The carriage began to slowly move towards Xumi's spirit capital. "Little brother, you're an alchemist, right?" The old man seemed to sense something and asked. Nie Tian nodded, still thinking about the youth's aura. 17 or 18 years old and a mental strength of the 51st step. Your talent in the alchemic Tao can be called amazing. There hasn't been a genius like you in the 3,000 miniature worlds for hundreds of years. I'm afraid that even that Gu Qiulong can't compare to you. The old man's lips twitched as he said with a profound meaning. Chapter 531. When the old man heard Nie Tian's sudden strange cry, he had a strange look and simply did not hear clearly what he was saying. But Nie Tian was somewhat excited and almost jumped up in excitement. He really did not expect that after more than 100 years, he would encounter the legendary 100 virtual body again. 100 virtual body was a very unique kind of spiritual body of heaven and earth. The specific rank was unknown, but this kind of spiritual body of heaven and earth was different from other spiritual bodies of heaven and earth. Ordinary spiritual bodies of heaven and earth would enhance and strengthen the martial artist's martial body. Zhang Xiaoyi's battle cloud tyrant body was like this. Rui Qianyu's elder brother Rui Qianyu's 9 yang body was also like this. However, the 100 void body does not strengthen the martial body. Instead, it weakens the martial body. Of course, at the same time that 100 virtual body weakened the martial body, it could also weaken other people's martial body. To put it simply, a martial artist who possessed the 100 virtual body could weaken their own martial body and then let others who were several times or even dozens of times stronger than themselves be weakened. They could then use this to wear down their opponent's strength and achieve victory. 100 virtual bodies' power was not strong at the beginning, but the further it went, the more powerful it became. Nie Tian had once encountered a martial artist with 100 virtual body in his previous life, and he was very familiar with him. He was considered one of his formidable opponents, Dongchuan Sword Evil Duguanai, who was ranked in the Heaven Realm Sword Path's 5 Great Apex with him. Duguanai was the only one among the Sword Path's 5 Great Apex whose strength had not reached the 9th level Heavenly Emperor. But by relying on 100 virtual body, his strength was not beneath Nie Tian and the other 3. Even in the battle between Nie Tian and Duguanai, he was basically suppressed, and the other party gained the upper hand many times. Of course, the spar between them was just an exchange of sword path. If it was a real life and death battle, even if Nie Tian did not have full confidence, he would not be afraid of the other party. Among the Heaven Realm Sword Path's 5 Great Apex, Nie Tian and Limitless Sword Saint Emo Qianjun and Western Region Sword Emperor Jiu Qiansheng were best friends, while Dongchuan Sword Evil Duguanai and North Sea Sword Chancellor Guihen were only ordinary friends. Just now, Nie Tian felt the aura of 100 virtual body from the youth in the carriage, but he did not react. Just now, Nie Tian felt the aura of 100 virtual body from the youth in the carriage, but he did not react for a moment. The 100 virtual body was the first to weaken. It was rumored that those who were born with the 100 virtual body rarely lived past the age of 10. Most of them couldn't withstand the torture of the 100 virtual qi. Nie Tian had heard that Dugunai had 9 elder brothers, all of whom had the 100 Void's body. However, he was the only one who had survived. All 9 of his brothers had died when they were 5 or 6 years old. It was already a miracle that the youth in the carriage had 100 virtual body, especially in the lower world where heaven and earth spiritual energy was lacking. It was a miracle among miracles. Without a doubt, this youth's talent was absolutely excellent. His perseverance was also unquestionable, and from his attitude towards Meng Xueqing, his character was also very good. Old man, my surname is Nie, how should I address you? Nie Tian suppressed the shock in his heart and tried to get close to the old man. My surname is Yang, the old man said in a low muffled voice, seemingly dissatisfied with Nie Tian's strange shout. Nie Tian faintly smiled and said, Then I'll call you Old Man Yang. Is the youth in the carriage your grandson? Old Man Yang glanced at Nie Tian, obviously becoming more vigilant. Nie Tian hurriedly smiled and said, I was just asking. Some things are better left unasked. Old Man Yang said indifferently, then drove away, no longer paying attention to Nie Tian. Nie Tian didn't ask any more questions since he had been snubbed. He guessed that Old Man Yang must have gone to see his grandson and wanted to go to Shumi Spirit Capital to find a great figure. Unfortunately, he was destined to be disappointed. Let alone Shumi Spirit Capital, even in the upper layer of Shumi world, it was difficult to find someone who knew about the 100 virtual body. Even Nie Tian only knew a little bit about it. He only learned a few methods to restrain the 100 virtual body from his battles with Dugunai. In the next few days, Nie Tian and Old Man Yang only exchanged a few words. On the other hand, Meng Xueqing and the youth in the carriage laughed from time to time, chatting happily. Old Man Yang drove the tiger-striped black antler deer. During the day it was very slow, just like an old horse, but at night it was extremely fast, covering thousands of miles in the night. 5 days later, Nie Tian and the others saw the towering city gate of Shumi Spirit Capital. Shumi Spirit Capital was the core city of the 3,000 small world. It was vast and majestic. The outer city wall was 100 meters high. There was a spiritual array on the city wall, and the surrounding space was sealed. It was almost impossible for an ordinary person to directly enter the city. The huge city wall surrounded Sumi Ling City tightly, leaving only a gate leading to the city. Anyone who wanted to enter the city had to pass through this gate. This city gate was extremely tall, at least 500 meters high, 300 to 400 meters wide, and at least 5 to 6 meters thick. Moreover, it was made of deep-sea black iron, which was incomparably strong. Coupled with the protection of the spiritual array, even a spirit wheel realm expert would not be able to break it. Nie Tian couldn't help but shake his head as he gazed at the city gate, where a long line stretched as far as the eye could see. According to the speed of the long line, they would have to wait at least a day to enter the city. Fortunately, outside the main city of Shumi Spirit Capital, there was an outer city built on both sides of the main road of Spirit Capital. It was to provide temporary rest for those who couldn't enter the city. Nie Tian looked around and found that the outer city of Shumi Spirit Capital seemed to be much larger than Heaven Luo City. From afar, it seemed to be dozens of miles in radius. Big brother Nie, Grandpa Yang, I have this. We can directly enter the city. At this time, Meng Xueqing pulled the curtain open and revealed a small head. A snow-white hand stretched out and there was a token on it. The token in her hand was very familiar to Nie Tian. It was the red robe token of the Alchemist Guild. Meng Fanchen was the president of the Alchemist Guild and the only white robe elder. Only he had the white robe token. If Meng Xueqing suddenly took out a white robe token, even a fool could guess her identity. Meng Fanchen was probably afraid that the white robe token would be too eye-catching, so he gave Meng Xueqing a red robe token. This could ensure her safety and hide her identity. Little girl, why do you have the red robe token of the Alchemist Guild? Seeing the red robe token, Elder Yang was stunned and asked in surprise. My grandfather gave it to me. Meng Xueqing's beautiful eyes flickered and she honestly said, Your grandfather? Elder Yang was stunned for a moment and then asked, What's your name? Meng Xueqing. Meng Xueqing answered. Meng Fanqian's granddaughter? Elder Yang asked again. Yes. Meng Xueqing nodded. Elder Yang's expression stiffened for a moment and his eyes became very complicated. No one knew what he was thinking. We can't use the red robe token. We'll queue here. After a while, Elder Yang said with a firm tone. Why? Meng Xueqing was puzzled. Wasn't it stupid not to use the privilege? Nie Tian waved his hand, indicating that she shouldn't ask. Chapter 532. Old Man Yang was clearly very strong, and his identity was definitely not simple. However, he disguised himself as an ordinary person. Even his luxurious carriage was tattered. He did not want to attract attention. If he used the red-robed order, it would be equivalent to exposing himself. Of course, he would not use it. Meng Xueqing pursed her lips. Although she was a bit dissatisfied, she still obediently sat back in the car. Nie Tian was not in a hurry. He lay on the side of the carriage and narrowed his eyes slightly. You knew she was Meng Fanqian's granddaughter? Old Man Yang had already noticed that Nie Tian and Meng Xueqing weren't familiar with each other. In fact, they had only known each other for a few days. Yes, I know. Nie Tian nodded. This girl, Meng Xueqing, was too honest. She told everyone the truth, so he had no choice but to know. Elder Yang frowned slightly and asked, Are you from Sumi Spirit Capital? Nie Tian shook his head. I'm here to participate in the Sumeru Grand Meeting. It's a grand meeting that happens once every 10 years. Of course, I can't miss it. Old Man Yang nodded silently. He guessed that Nie Tian was also here to participate in the Sumeru Grand Meeting. With Nie Tian's talent and strength, if he were to participate in the Sumeru Grand Meeting in another 20 years, or even 10 years, it was extremely likely that he would become the champion of the Sumeru Martial Meeting. But now, with his true element first layer strength, he was still too weak to compete with those who were several decades older than him. Not to mention anything else, just those martial warriors under the age of 30 on the Sumi Spirit Capital Genius list, many of them were far stronger than Nie Tian. However, Nie Tian's psychic power was freakishly high. Even geniuses under the age of 50 would rarely be able to reach the 30th grade. The 40th grade would be as rare as phoenix feathers and qilin horns. As for the 50th grade, they were as rare as the stars in the night sky. He really didn't know how Nie Tian cultivated his spiritual power. Even if he had cultivated his spiritual power since he was in his mother's womb, it shouldn't be so terrifying. Elder Yang reckoned that if there were no accidents, Nie Tian would be able to easily obtain the position of champion in the Sumeru Pill refining competition. A teenage Tier 5 alchemy master, once it appeared, the entire Sumi Spirit Capital would go crazy. Elder Yang, why did you come to Sumi Spiritual Capital? Nie Tian could not help but ask when he saw Old Master Yang deep in thought. However, he was already prepared for Old Master Yang to refuse to answer. Since you already know, why bother asking? To Nie Tian's surprise, Old Master Yang didn't refuse. Instead, he asked rhetorically. Sure enough, Old Master Yang was here to treat his grandson, Yang Zixiao. Nie Tian had already learned from Meng Xueqing that the youth in the carriage was called Yang Zixiao. Old Yang, forgive me for speaking bluntly, but I'm afraid no one can cure your grandson's illness, Nie Tian said calmly. The 100 Void body was not an illness, but a strange spiritual body. Unfortunately, Old Yang didn't know about it and thought it was an illness. If this was an illness, then it was an illness that no one could cure. Unexpectedly, Elder Yang's reaction was very calm. It was just that he couldn't hide the sorrow on his old face. He let out a long sigh and didn't say anything. Grandpa. Inside the carriage, Yang Zixiao heard the conversation and said, In life, life and death are decreed by fate. Xiao Er is no longer afraid of death. Don't feel sad for Xiao Er. Xiao Er. Old Master Yang choked with sobs. Tears flowed down his cheeks silently. Hearing Yang Zixiao's words, Nie Tian's heart couldn't help but tremble slightly. It was really rare for a teenager to be able to see life and death so indifferently. If this indifferent heart was placed on the pursuit of martial arts, one day, he would definitely be a powerhouse standing at the peak. After waiting bitterly for a day, Nie Tian and the others finally paid the entrance fee and entered the legendary Sumi Spirit City. After entering the city, Nie Tian and the others finally had a hint of surprise on their faces. Sumi Spirit City is indeed different. Looking around, Nie Tian immediately discovered that the streets here were much wider than other cities. Moreover, the buildings on both sides were obviously tall and majestic, looking very grand. Such a city was not much different from some of the small cities in the Heaven Realm's God Realm. This was still the outer area of Sumi Spirit City. The buildings in the city must be even more magnificent. Go! Right at this moment, a domineering roar sounded out. 2 armored horses galloped past, heading towards the outside of the city. Tang! Nie Tian glanced at them and saw the word Tang engraved on the iron armor behind the 2 people. He immediately understood that these 2 people were from the Tang family. The Tang family was indeed worthy of being the head of the 4 great families. The 2 people who randomly appeared were actually martial artists at the 5th level of true essence. This kind of strength was comparable to the top experts of second-rate empires. Let's go, Old Master Yang said and prepared to leave. The carriage slowly moved forward. Just as they walked a few hundred meters, 2 figures descended from the sky, blocking Nie Tian and the others. Old Master Yang stopped the carriage. His eyes slightly narrowed as a strange expression flashed across his face. Then, he walked out of the carriage, coughed twice and said, "Sirs, why are you blocking this old man's carriage?" It was obvious that Old Master Yang didn't want to cause trouble, so he pretended to be an ordinary old man. Nie Tian sized up the 2 figures in front of him. They were 2 middle-aged men in their 40s. Their faces were fierce, and their eyes seemed to be filled with killing intent. Humph! One of them opened his mouth and sneered. He didn't even bother to look at Old Master Yang and directly said, "Old man, pay the city entrance fee." City entrance fee? Old Master Yang was stunned for a moment, then said with a face full of smiles, "Sirs, you must be mistaken. Our carriage just passed by the city gate, and we have already paid the city entrance fee." The man glared fiercely at Old Master Yang with a trace of coldness in his eyes and said, "That's their city entrance fee. We haven't paid ours yet." "Third brother, why are you talking nonsense with this old man? See what he has on him and just take it." The other person was even more ruthless and directly roared in anger. Old Master Yang's face clearly stiffened, but he still endured it and said, "How much do you want to pay for the city entrance fee?" Nie Tian slightly frowned. With Old Master Yang's strength, it was more than enough to deal with these 2 guys, but he had to pretend to be smiling. It was really hard on him. He could tell that these 2 guys were scoundrels. They were probably specially looking for those unlucky people who entered the Sumi Spirit Capital for the first time and did not have much strength to rob. Old Master Yang and the rest looked like easy to bully. Of course, they were targeted by them. This number. That person raised 2 fingers and said with a chuckle, 2 high-grade essence crystals? Old Master Yang was stunned for a moment, then gritted his teeth and said, "This old man will pay." As he said, he took out 2 high-grade essence crystals and handed it over. When they entered the city just now, they paid 2 high-grade essence crystals. Although it was not much, it was not little either. One had to know that when Nie Tian held the dragon blood martial meet back then, he only charged 1 low-grade essence crystal as the city entrance fee. Sumi Spirit Capital's city entrance fee was already 200 times this price. Chapter 533. Old Yang's face stiffened as the crystals were sent flying. His entire body released an irrepressible anger. He was already bowing and scraping because he didn't want to cause trouble. Unfortunately, this world was too cruel. The more obedient he was, the more trouble would come. Old man, you're not convinced, huh? If you're tired of living, we brothers will help you loosen your bones. How about it? That person saw that old Yang was angry, but he wasn't afraid at all and said arrogantly. An old man without the slightest bit of essence, force, and a tattered carriage. One look and they could tell that he didn't have any background. How could he be a threat to them? Old Yang shook his head slightly and stepped into the carriage with his hands behind his back. He said to Nie Tian, "I'll leave these two to you." Nie Tian curled his lips slightly. This old man wasn't polite at all. However, he liked this kind of face-slapping and was happy to help. Nie Tian took a step forward, and a ferocious and domineering sword intent shot out, forcing the two of them to retreat. He glanced at the two of them as if he was looking at two idiots and sneered, "We look like pushovers, don't we?" The two's eyes trembled slightly. They didn't notice Nie Tian's existence earlier. Only now did they realize that the young man in front of them was actually a first-level true element martial artist. Although his strength was much weaker than theirs, he was only in his teens. It was too terrifying. The two calmed down and said coldly, "Stinking brat, hand over all the crystals on you. Don't cause trouble. There are some people you can't afford to offend." Nie Tian smiled playfully and said, "Don't be ridiculous. There's no one in this world that I can't afford to offend." Swish, swish. With that, two sword intents shot out, and a bloody gash appeared on each of their faces, dyeing half of their faces red. What a terrifying sword intent! The two were stunned and only reacted when blood flowed down. Nie Tian's sword intent was swift and sharp, not giving them any time to react. "Stinking brat, you're courting death." Both of them touched the wounds on their faces at the same time and shouted angrily, revealing their killing intent. However, Nie Tian didn't give them the slightest chance to resist. The corners of his mouth curled up coldly, and then an even more ferocious sword intent surged out. Although these two people were at the 5th level of true element, in front of Nie Tian, who was at the 1st level of true element, they were just lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Just when the fatal sword intent was about to kill the two of them, a force whistled through the air and easily eliminated the sword intent like the spring wind and rain. "Let them go." Nie Tian turned around and looked at old Yang, who sighed softly. The person who saved them was old Master Yang. Obviously, he just wanted Nie Tian to teach the two of them a lesson and did not want him to kill them. "Get lost!" Nie Tian frowned and roared. The two of them didn't dare to stay for another moment and fled in panic, disappearing in the blink of an eye. They have a force behind them, otherwise they wouldn't dare to rob at the city gate. "If we kill them, there will be revenge." Before Nie Tian could speak, old Master Yang explained. Nie Tian shook his head with a bitter smile and murmured, "I'm afraid if we don't kill them, there will be revenge." According to Nie Tian's methods, he would definitely cut the weeds and eliminate the root. Now that the two of them ran away, it was truly letting the tiger return to the mountain. "Just wait, there will definitely be people coming for revenge." Old Master Yang didn't say much and directly jumped into the carriage, and Nie Tian immediately followed. Of course, Nie Tian knew in his heart that old Master Yang had asked him to make a move. On one hand, it was to teach those two ignorant fellows a lesson, and on the other hand, it was to test his strength. In the end, old Master Yang still didn't trust him. A moment later, the carriage drove into the inner city of Su-Mi Spirit Capital. There was a bustling scene everywhere, and it was very lively. "Miss Meng, you should get off and leave." Old Master Yang stopped the carriage and lightly shouted. Meng Xueqing's head popped out and said, "I haven't reached the Alchemist Guild yet." This girl was really honest. She even wanted old Master Yang to send her to the Alchemist Guild. The Alchemist Guild is just ahead. You can go by yourself. Old Master Yang opened the curtain and let Meng Xueqing get off. Nie Tian was slightly stunned. Old Master Yang seemed to be very familiar with the Alchemist Guild. Moreover, when he mentioned Meng Fanqian's name just now, his expression was very calm, without the slightest respect. Vaguely, Nie Tian felt that Old Master Yang seemed to have some relationship with the Alchemist Guild. Meng Xueqing was helpless. She could only say goodbye to Yang Zixiao and get off the carriage. She said to Nie Tian, "Big brother Nie, let's go." Nie Tian sneered and said, "Miss, Old Master Yang told you to leave, but he didn't tell me to leave. Besides, going to the Alchemist Guild is like going home. Why should I go there? You saved my life. I want my grandfather to repay you." Meng Xueqing said seriously. "Forget it." Nie Tian waved his hand and said, "Let's talk about it next time." "All right." Meng Xueqing was slightly disappointed. She pinched Nie Tian's arm fiercely and turned to the carriage and said, "Little brother Zixiao, I'm leaving. Big sister Meng, we'll meet again." Yang Zixiao's weak voice came from the carriage. Meng Xueqing turned and left. Her nimble figure quickly disappeared. Old Master Yang. After Meng Xueqing left, Nie Tian no longer held back and directly said, "You came to Sumi Spiritual Capital to find President Meng Fanqian, right?" Old Master Yang's eyes narrowed. His expression said, "How did you know?" Nie Tian nodded and smiled. Old Master Yang's expression told him that he had guessed correctly. Old Master Yang didn't have much respect for Meng Fanqian. This undoubtedly showed that his status was not far from the latter. And judging from Old Master Yang's spiritual force, he must be an alchemist. Since Old Master Yang felt that he didn't have the ability to cure Yang Zixiao's 100 virtual body, then he could only seek help from one person. That person was Meng Fanqian. Old Master Yang, Meng Xueqing was here just now. Why didn't you go with her to the Alchemist Guild? Nie Tian asked. It's not time yet. Old Master Yang coldly replied. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. He immediately said, Meng Fanqian can't cure Yang Zixiao's illness. He can't, but can you? Old Master Yang said cold. Obviously, he was very disgusted with Nie Tian's words. I can. Nie Tian nodded. His eyes flashed with extreme determination. Old Master Yang heard Nie Tian's words and saw his eyes. He couldn't help but be stunned. After a few seconds he said cold, Boy, don't joke about Xiao Er's illness. Otherwise, even if you saved us, I won't show mercy. Cold words, cold eyes, cold killing intent. Old Master Yang was really angry. Yang Zixiao's illness was a pain in his heart. No one could touch it, let alone joke about it. Nie Tian stepped forward and said, Do I look like I'm joking? Old Master Yang was stunned again. His eyes trembled. He said, How can I believe you? Yang Zixiao is only at the first level of the Origin Spirit Realm, but he can defeat a 9th level Origin Spirit Realm martial artist. That's because he can weaken his opponent's battle strength, right? Nie Tian said without fear. Chapter 534. Yang Zixiao could weaken the opponent's strength. Only Old Yang and himself knew about this. And Old Yang had tested Yang Zixiao's strength. Although he was only at the first level of the Origin Spirit Realm, he could fight against a 9th level of the Origin Spirit Realm martial artist. It was exactly the same as what Nie Tian said. The most important thing was, how did Nie Tian know about these things? Could it be that he can really cure Xiao Er? A guess emerged in Old Yang's mind, causing him to tremble. A teenager could cure Yang Zixiao's strange illness. Old Yang couldn't believe it. But if Nie Tian couldn't, how did he know about Yang Zixiao's condition? Nie, can you really cure Xiao Er's illness? After being stunned for a few seconds, Old Yang's heart was in turmoil. Finally, he couldn't help but speak. His voice was trembling. He didn't know what to call Nie Tian because he only knew that the boy's surname was Nie, but he didn't know his name. Nie Tian's face was indifferent. He nodded slightly and said, Yang Zixiao isn't sick. The reason why he's weak is because he's a natural spiritual body, the 100 virtual body. 100 virtual body? Even though old Yang was very knowledgeable, he had never heard of this name. He couldn't help but be stunned. The 100 virtual body is a kind of heaven and earth spiritual body of unknown grade. It is very peculiar. Nie Tian briefly explained the 100 virtual body and finally said, if you want to restrain the 100 virtual body, the best thing is the 6 Yang polarity. 6 Yang extremities? Old Yang still hadn't heard of it and was stunned again. Let's go to the Alchemist Guild first. There should be something I need there. Nie Tian didn't say much and prepared to go to the Alchemist Guild. Old Yang stopped him and said, Mr. Nie, let's go to the Alchemist Guild branch. Old Yang's way of addressing Nie Tian changed. This meant that he already believed Nie Tian. Okay. Nie Tian readily agreed. Old Yang was very familiar with Su Mi Ling capital. After a few turns, they arrived at an Alchemist Guild branch. Su Mi Ling city was too big. Other than the Alchemist Guild, there were 7 other branches, and each branch was bigger than the Alchemist Guild of a first-rate empire. Mr. Nie, this is the 3rd branch of the Alchemist Guild. Let's go in, Elder Yang said as he helped Yang Zixiao out. It was only now that Nie Tian had the opportunity to thoroughly observe this young man who possessed the 100 virtual body. He looked to be about 13 or 14 years old. He was thin and pale, which made him look like he had a big frame. He was only a little shorter than Nie Tian. His forehead was covered with fine beads of sweat, and there was a faint smile on the corner of his mouth. He had a maturity that far exceeded his age. Big brother Nie, Yang Zixiao greeted politely with a bow. Nie Tian nodded slightly. This young man was too weak. Just looking at him made one's heart ache. Xiao I'm useless. Old Yang's heart ached as he watched his grandson suffer. The Su Mi Ling Capital Alchemist Guild's 3rd branch was no different from the other Alchemist Guild. The hall was filled with all kinds of dazzling medicinal herbs. There was an endless stream of customers. Some were curious about the Alchemist Guild, some were here to buy medicinal herbs, and some were alchemists who came to increase their knowledge of medicinal herbs. Sir, welcome. How can I help you? As soon as Nie Tian and the others entered, a beautiful waitress wearing revealing clothes with a hot figure walked over and greeted them sweetly. Nie Tian glanced at the waitress, smiled faintly, and said directly, I want 6 kinds of medicinal herbs, acacia grass, star anise, flaming sea cucumber, magic light black beans, 36 wolfberries, fir seal yang. I want 100 of each, as long as it's the freshest. As the clear voice fell, the waitress's face gradually changed. Her face became red, her breathing became a little rapid, and her chest rose and fell unsteadily. This was because the medicinal herbs that Nie Tian wanted were all the best Yang essence medicinal herbs, which were great tonics for men. The beautiful waitress's eyes wandered around Nie Tian's body as she muttered in her heart. This young master looks strong and healthy. He doesn't look like a weak person. Why does he need so many tonics? Nie Tian did not waste time talking to her. Seeing what she was thinking, he directly said, I bought it for myself. Hurry up and get the medicine. All right, young master, please wait a moment. The waitress agreed and immediately turned to leave, going to the inner hall to get the medicine. However, at that moment, countless gazes were fixed on Nie Tian, pointing at him and whispering to each other. Nie Tian didn't care. He didn't care about other people's comments. Old Yang frowned at this moment and sent a voice transmission with unconcealable anger. Mr. Nie, those 6 medicinal herbs are the 6 Yang extremes you were talking about? With a faint smile, Nie Tian replied via voice transmission, That's right. The 6 Yang extremes refer to the 6 great tonics for men. Humph. Old Yang snorted coldly and said in a muffled voice, Mr. Nie, the 6 Yang extremes you were talking about are clearly tonics for men with Yang deficiency. What does it have to do with Xiao Er's illness? Old Yang couldn't help but be angry. The 6 yang extremes were great tonics, and Yang Zixiao's body was already weak. Taking these tonics was simply courting death. Everyone knew that tonics were taboo for a weak body. This was common sense. Nie Tian asked for the so-called 6 yang extremes in one go, and he even asked for 100 of them. This was clearly to make up for Yang Zixiao's death. How could old Yang not be angry? Nie Tian's expression was calm. He had already expected this reaction from old Yang. He explained, "The 100 void body will produce 100 void qi in a martial artist's body, weakening the martial artist's physique. The medicinal herbs that can suppress the 100 void body are the 6 yang extremes. The 6 yang extremes can stimulate the martial artist's body to produce yang qi and blood essence to resist the 100 void qi." In his previous life, Nie Tian had met Duguanai. The latter often took some tonics to resist the 100 void qi in his body. Yang Zixiao had never taken a medicinal herb with the 6 yang extremes. Once he used it, the effect would definitely be very good. However, the side effect of the 6 yang extremes was that it would make the martial artist's body burn with lust. But Nie Tian felt that with Yang Zixiao's willpower, it shouldn't be a problem for him to resist this kind of physical desire. "Is what you said true?" Old Yang saw that Nie Tian's expression didn't change, and his voice couldn't help but calm down. Nie Tian said straightforwardly, "If Yang Zixiao dies, just kill me." Seeing Nie Tian so calm, old Yang calmed down a lot. From beginning to end, Yang Zixiao didn't say a word. He didn't know why, but he trusted Nie Tian very much. Perhaps it was because Meng Xueqing had praised Nie Tian too much in the carriage. A moment later, the beautiful waitress appeared again, holding a spatial bag in her hand. Behind her, a young alchemist wearing an alchemist robe walked over. "Grandmastering, this is the medicinal herb that this young master wants." The waitress pointed at Nie Tian from afar. Chapter 535. To be able to become a rank 4 alchemist in his 30s, the talent of the person in front of him was indeed amazing. However, the arrogance between this person's eyebrows was too strong. The way he looked at people was not right, and his arrogance was obvious. The appearance of this person immediately attracted everyone's attention, causing a burst of exclamations. "It's Mastering, why is he here? He is the youngest rank 4 alchemist in the 3rd branch. His future is limitless. I heard that in this year's Shumi Alchemist competition, Master Ing is a popular candidate for the first seed of the pill competition. With Master Ying's talent in alchemy, he might really be able to win the pill competition." "That's not necessarily true. I heard that there will be an even more terrifying alchemist genius in the 2nd branch. He seems to be called Zhang Feng. He is only in his 20s, but he is also a rank 4 alchemist." The crowd discussed one after another. The young alchemist who was called Master Ing couldn't help but be secretly happy. However, when he heard the last sentence, his face flashed with anger. His gaze turned to Nie Tian, and his face immediately became gloomy. He directly took the space bag from the waiter's hand and strode over. His gaze swept across Nie Tian's body, and he was slightly surprised. He asked solemnly, "This is the medicinal herb you want?" "Yes." "Is there a problem?" Nie Tian could see that the person in front of him was up to no good. He was angry and had a posture of denouncing him. He couldn't help but wonder how he had offended him. "There's a problem," Ing Rui replied in a strange tone and then said, "This branch doesn't have 36 wolfberries. Please follow me to the 2nd branch to get it." "No more?" Nie Tian's eyes narrowed, and he secretly became vigilant. He spread out his divine sense and immediately found a suspicious person. He immediately understood what was going on. 36 wolfberries, this was the most common medicinal herb. The dignified Shumi Spirit Capital's alchemist branch did not have such a medicinal herb. It was clearly nonsense. Furthermore, Nie Tian discovered 2 familiar faces among the crowd. They were none other than the 2 men who had demanded the entrance fee from them. It was obvious that the young alchemist in front of him was in the same group as the two people. Mr. Nye, let's leave first. Elder Yang also sensed that something was wrong and transmitted his voice. However, Nye Tian's expression was indifferent. He ignored old Master Yang's advice and sized up Master Ying before him. He asked calmly, "How should I address you?" Ying Rui. Ying Rui's face was filled with arrogance, his nose in the air. He did not put Nye Tian in his eyes at all. He had already seen that Nye Tian was a true element first-layer martial artist. With this kind of strength, coupled with his age, his martial arts talent was amazing. But in the eyes of an alchemist, martial arts talent was nothing. It simply couldn't be compared to alchemy talent. He didn't pay attention to Nye Tian's spiritual power. If he carefully sensed it now, he would definitely be shocked. Ying Rui. Hearing this name, Nye Tian's heart suddenly trembled. He seemed to have seen this name before, but he couldn't remember where. "Mr. Nye, we shouldn't stay here for long. Let's go." Nye Tian's face was indifferent, but old Master Yang was very nervous and repeatedly urged him. Nye Tian was helpless. He wanted to play with this Ying Rui, but old Master Yang was so afraid. It seemed that there was no chance. He faintly smiled and said, "I don't want the 36 wolfberries. I only want the other 5 medicinal ingredients. How many crystals?" Saying that, Nye Tian stretched out his hand, wanting to take the medicinal ingredients to examine them. But Ying Rui directly threw the space bag aside, and suddenly became furious. He shouted, "Brat, do you think the Alchemist Guild is a place to play? You said you don't want the medicinal ingredients just because you don't want them. How can it be so easy?" Seeing Ying Rui suddenly explode, Nye Tian couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. This guy was too impatient. He revealed his dagger so quickly. Ying Rui, on the other hand, was overbearing at this moment. His eyes emitted a sharp killing intent as he roared, "Acacia grass, star anise, blazing sea cucumber, magic light black beans, 36 wolfberries, fur seal sundae. These medicinal ingredients you want are all great tonic for men. Look at your ruddy complexion and calm aura. How is there any sign of yang deficiency? You clearly came to the Alchemist Guild to cause trouble." Nye Tian's complexion was indeed very good. He didn't look like he needed any tonic at all. Although Yang Zixiao, who was beside him, looked weak and sick, he was only 13 years old. His face was tender and he was still a child. Of course, no one would think that these medicinal ingredients were bought for him. Nye Tian's brows furrowed even tighter. This Ying Rui was too shameless. It was clear that he was using his position to avenge a personal grudge. This brat has such guts. He actually dared to come to the Alchemist Guild to cause trouble. His head must have been squeezed by the door. I reckon that he's a young master from a place. Relying on the power of his family, he still wants to be in the limelight in Su Mi Ling City. He's really stupid. So many great tonics. If he really ate them, wouldn't he die from pleasure? Haha. The crowd started to discuss. They were all supporting Ying Rui. They were prepared to watch a good show from Nye Tian. Old man Yang sighed softly. He really shouldn't have let Nye Tian spare the lives of those two. It was too late to regret it now. Looking at Ying Rui's posture, it was impossible for him to let Nye Tian and the others leave safely. At this time, Nye Tian had already sensed that there were dozens of martial artists in green clothes around him. They were all at the 5th level of true essence. There were even 2 at the 7th level of true essence. Ying Rui, Ying Rui. Nye Tian didn't panic at all. He kept repeating this name, but he couldn't remember where he had seen it before. "Brat, obediently follow me out to get the medicinal ingredient. I guarantee that you'll be safe." Ying Rui didn't know what was going on with Nye Tian. The corner of his mouth curled into a sinister smile as he said coldly. Nye Tian sneered and said, "Master Ying, you really treat me as a 3-year-old child. Don't you just want the city entrance fee? Just give me a price. How many crystals?" I'll give it to you. What Ing Rue wanted to do, Nye Tian was very clear. He was afraid that once they left the third branch, they would immediately be surrounded and killed by stronger martial artists. On the contrary, staying here would be safer. Brat, do you treat me as your slave? Ing Rue gritted his teeth and his face trembled. He didn't expect Nye Tian to be so arrogant. He actually dared to humiliate him in front of so many people. Nye Tianling sneered and said proudly, "Sorry, trash like you don't deserve to be my slave." You! Ing Rue couldn't breathe. His face turned blood red. The words that were stuck in his mouth couldn't come out. When everyone heard Nye Tian's words, they were all stunned. The scene became silent. A dignified fourth-rank alchemist didn't even have the qualifications to be his slave. Nye Tian's words were too arrogant. So arrogant that it made people's hair stand on end. One must know that Ing Rue was a member of the Alchemist Guild. Moreover, he was currently in the Alchemist Guild. For Nye Tian to say such words, he was simply looking for death. Nye Tian looked at Ing Rue, who had a pent-up breath in his chest. The corner of his mouth couldn't help but smile. But at this moment, a light flashed in his mind. He suddenly remembered where he had seen the name Ing Rue before. On the name list scroll that Diao Zhengde left behind. Chapter 536. Nye Tian finally recalled where he had seen Ing Rue's name before. It was on the name list that Diao Zhengde left behind. When he killed Diao Zhengde in the chaotic abyss, Nye Tian had obtained a lot of Yuan crystal spiritual pills and a name list scroll. On the name list scroll, other than a few dozen names, there was also a time, place, and some other details. There was even the identity and strength of each person. If Nye Tian remembered correctly, behind the name Ing Rue, there seemed to be a fourth-rank alchemist, gold rank. This meant that Ing Rue was a fourth-rank alchemist, and at the same time, a gold-rank assassin from Ling Xian Tian Pavilion. Previously, Nye Tian found it strange that Ling Xian Tian Pavilion had planted so many spies in the Alchemist Guild. What were they trying to do? Until now, he still hadn't figured it out. But no matter what, Ling Xian Tian Pavilion seemed to be brewing a big conspiracy. Now that Nye Tian knew Ing Rue's identity, his lips curled into a sneer and his eyes emitted a cold murderous intent. If Ing Rue was just a rogue alchemist who collected entrance fees, perhaps Nye Tian would consider killing him. But since he was an assassin from Ling Xian Tian Pavilion, there was no need to keep him alive. Sensing Nye Tian's murderous intent, Ing Rue's eyes trembled, but he quickly calmed down and shouted, "What do you want? Don't tell me you dare to kill me?" Nye Tian took a step forward and a murderous sword intent gushed out, forcing Ing Rue to take a few steps back. He said coldly, "So what if I kill you? You dare?" Ing Rue steadied himself and became even more arrogant. "This is the Alchemist Guild. I don't believe that you dare to kill a fourth-rank alchemist in front of everyone. You'll find out soon." Nye Tianling laughed and the aura around his body suddenly rose. Waves of sword intent filled the entire guild hall. What a powerful sword intent! Everyone's eyes trembled and their hearts trembled. They didn't expect this inconspicuous young man to be so powerful. "Mr. Nye, don't be rash. He's a fourth-tier alchemist, you can't kill him casually." Old man Yang sensed that Nye Tian's killing intent was not just to deter him, but to kill Ing Rue. He quickly sent a voice transmission to remind him. Killing a rank 4 alchemist master in the Sumi Spirit Capital Alchemist Guild, even if Nye Tian was a direct descendant of the 4 great families, he would absolutely not be able to bear the wrath of the Alchemist Guild. "Old Yang, you saw it. It wasn't that I wanted to kill him, but he wanted to die. I had no choice but to kill him." Only then did Ing Rue realize that Nye Tian was a madman who actually dared to kill him. Only then did Ing Rue realize that Nye Tian was a madman. Ing Rue didn't know that Nye Tian really dared to kill him. "What are you waiting for? Do you want to watch him kill me?" Ing Rue was so frightened that his voice became shrill. He no longer had the demeanor of an alchemist, and was like a shrew cursing on the street. "Everyone, listen up. This person is causing havoc in the Alchemist Guild, publicly insulting Mastering, and challenging the dignity of the Alchemist Guild. Kill him." A martial artist in azure clothes jumped out and pointed at Nyetian, roaring in a deep voice. Nyetian took a look at that person. It was one of the 2 7th-level True Essence martial artists among the martial artists in azure clothes. These martial artists in azure clothes were the Dan Wu Imperial Guards of the Dan Wu Hall. Looking at this person's strength, he should be a captain of the Dan Wu Imperial Guards. There were 17 commanders in the Dan Wu Hall. Nyetian had seen 2 of them so far. One was the 7th commander, Zhao Kuo. He once appeared at the Dragon Blood martial meet at Gu Gu's request and was severely injured by the Heaven Burial Association's Wei Yangzi. The other was the 8th commander, Wu Mang. He had already died in the chaotic abyss. Yes. The rest of the Dan Wu Imperial Guards roared in unison, extremely imposing. "Elder Yang, you don't have to make a move. I alone am enough to deal with these people." Nyetian roared and stepped out fearlessly. Elder Yang frowned slightly, but he still chose to protect Yang Zixiao and retreat. He decided not to make a move for now. If Nyetian was in danger, it wouldn't be too late to make a move then. Shameless boasting. That captain roared and made the first move. A mere first-level True Essence youth actually boasted that he could deal with a small team of Dan Wu Imperial Guards. How could he not be angry? Boom! That captain struck out with a palm. The palm of a tempestuous wave directly lifted up the limestone floor. A violent aura swept out and pressed towards Nyetian. The strength of a 7th-level True Essence martial artist cannot be underestimated. Nyetian felt the incoming pressure. His eyes narrowed slightly, and he instantly executed the sword Absolute Heaven Slash. It was one of the 3 intermediate stage styles of the AO sword art, Night Collapsing Sword. Bang! When the sword struck out, sword chi overflowed. Under the surging sword shadow, the sword shadow whizzed out and clashed with the giant palm in the air. It was actually a dull sound. Nyetian took a few steps back, but his eyes were even more determined. With his current strength of first-level True Essence, he was still at a slight disadvantage against a 7th-level True Essence martial artist. "Stinking brat, you dare to behave atrociously in the Alchemist Guild with just this bit of strength? You must be tired of living." That captain gained the upper hand with one palm and laughed wildly. However, he was extremely shocked in his heart. He had used all of his strength in that palm strike just now. Even a martial artist at the 5th level of True Element would be instantly killed by it. However, the youth in front of him had only been forced back a few steps and was completely unscathed. His strength was strange and unimaginable. Elder Yang also frowned slightly as he watched from the side. The strength of the Dan Wu Imperial Guards was stronger than martial artists of the same level. The power of that palm strike just now was self-evident. However, Nyetian could easily take it. His terrifying talent was evident. Elder Yang was even more puzzled. Just who was Nyetian? How could he have such terrifying talent and strength? "Whoever wants to kill me, come." Nyetian laughed arrogantly and raised his longsword with an overbearing aura. Courting death. 5 to 6 martial artists in green roared at the same time and attacked together. A terrifying aura pressed over, overwhelming and suffocating people. "Good, I'll kill you too." Nyetian clearly saw that among those who attacked, there were those 2 fellows who collected the city fees. He didn't expect that these 2 were actually Dan Wu Imperial Guards. The dignified Dan Wu Imperial Guards actually went to rob. It was truly despicable. Divine sword. A domineering roar resounded. A terrifying sword shadow appeared in midair, directly rippling waves of air. Nyetian's figure actually rushed over at this moment. Swish, swish. His figure was like the wind, and the sword shadow was like lightning. 2 white sword rays flashed in the air. 2 streaks of blood splattered in the air, followed by shrill cries. When Nye Tian's figure returned to the original spot, the 2 martial artists in green were already on the ground, dead on the spot. Elder Yang focused his eyes. The 2 martial artists in green who died were the 2 who forcefully collected the city fees. The Dan Wu Imperial Guards have already fallen to this extent? Elder Yang sighed and shook his head. His expression was very pained. Chapter 537. The entire place was dead silent. Everyone seemed to not dare to believe the scene before their eyes. They were not shocked by Nye Tian's appalling strength, but shocked that he really dared to make a move to kill. The people he killed were Elixir Martial Guards, people from the Alchemist Association's Elixir Martial Hall. How could they be killed so casually? When the other martial artists in green saw that Nye Tian directly killed 2 people with a single move, their first reaction was to be stunned, but it was followed by extreme rage. Little bastard! That captain reacted after a long time. His eyes were bloodshot as he looked at Nye Tian and roared, "You dare to kill Elixir Martial Guards, you're dead." Nye Tian's face was calm as he said indifferently, "You guys want to take my life. Am I not allowed to retaliate?" These martial artists in green had an aggressive aura, and every move they made was a killing move. If it wasn't for Nye Tian being strong enough, he would have been a corpse long ago. He had no choice but to make a move to kill. Could it be that he had to stand still and let others kill him? Moreover, the 2 people he killed were openly robbing and bullying the weak. They were simply scoundrels and deserved death. Ing Rui, who retreated to the side, also stared at the 2 corpses on the ground blankly. He didn't expect Nye Tian's strength to be so tyrannical to such an extent, and even more so, he didn't expect Nye Tian to be so insolent without any scruples. And right at this moment, Nye Tian's gaze suddenly looked at Ing Rui. The corner of his mouth curled up with a sharp killing intent as he murmured, "The next one to die is you." Ing Rui's heart trembled violently when he was stared at by Nye Tian. His entire body involuntarily shuddered, and his forehead was actually dripping with sweat. He now completely believed that Nye Tian really dared to kill him. This guy in front of him was a complete madman who dared to kill anyone. Brothers, the people from the Elixir Martial Hall can't die in vain. Slaughter him for me. The 2 captains stood together and shouted in unison. Kill him! All the Elixir Martial Guard martial artists were roused up as they roared furiously, their auras surging. The surging killing intent filled the entire hall. Everyone's hearts were overwhelmed with shock as they subconsciously retreated. Old Master Yang's gaze also became complicated. This time, the matter had completely blown up. A Dan Wu city guard was killed in the Alchemist Guild's lobby. Such a thing hadn't happened for decades. It was simply a slap to the Alchemist Guild's face. Come on. Let me take a look at just how the Pill Martial Imperial Guard's combat strength is. Nye Tian's battle intent surged, and he wasn't afraid in the slightest. His face actually revealed an excited expression, and the sword intent on his entire body became even sharper, containing a suffocating murderous aura. Kill! Dozens of azure-robed cultivators attacked at the same time. Countless strands of essence gathered together, nearly solidifying. Nye Tian felt the space around him suddenly tighten, and a shapeless and enormous force pressed down on him from all directions, causing his breathing to become hurried. Boom! In the next moment, a magnificent force whizzed out, like a collapsing mountain, pressing down majestically. The momentum that erupted in an instant seemed to be able to destroy everything. These Dan Wu city guards usually cultivated together, and their tacit understanding between each other was very high. The combined attack of dozens of people was actually seamless, and the power was comparable to a spirit wheel realm martial artist's attack. Old Master Yang, who was watching the battle by the side, felt his heart tighten at this moment. His aura suddenly erupted, and he was already prepared to make a move to rescue. He predicted that Nye Tian wouldn't be able to withstand the combined attack of the Danwu city guards. Armor of Yama. But right at this moment, a domineering voice suddenly sounded, and an extremely domineering aura surged from Nye Tian's body. Such terrifying power! Old Master Yang's body stiffened in midair, and his aura dissipated. He could feel that the power that erupted from Nye Tian's body was very pure and abnormally domineering. It could definitely block a fatal blow. Armor of Yama was the rank 4 Star Soul on the Star Soul tablet. This was Nye Tian's second time using a rank 4 Star Soul, and it was the first purely defensive rank 4 Star Soul. Endless power of the stars gushed out, and a dazzling light spread out, directly breaking the aura pressure that enveloped Nye Tian's body, and instantly condensed into a Yama's evil appearance armor that was a few meters tall. The golden armor flickered, and it was dazzling. Boom! A tyrannical attack came immediately, and it directly bombarded on the armor of Yama, causing Nye Tian to fly out and crash heavily on a huge stone pillar in the hall. The stone pillar that was a few meters thick was directly broken, and the entire guild hall shook violently, as though it was on the verge of collapse. Nye Tian was in midair, and the armor of Yama was directly shattered. He felt a heat on his chest, and he spat out a mouthful of dirty blood. After landing, he took a few steps back and stood firmly. Everyone's eyes focused on him, and when they clearly saw the slight smile on Nye Tian's face, they were all dumbfounded. They couldn't imagine that the combined attack of dozens of Danwu city guards at level 5 True Essence Realm was actually blocked by Nye Tian. Was this young man's body made of steel? Was he still human? The two captains were also stunned, and their mouths were wide open, unable to make a sound for a long time. The other Danwu city guards also had the same expression, looking at Nye Tian as if they had seen a ghost. Nye Tian lightly patted the dust on his body, wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and smiled coldly. Next, it's my turn. Taking the combined attack of so many martial artists head-on, Nye Tian paid the price of a rank 4 Star Soul, and also suffered some injuries, but this didn't affect his battle strength. In fact, he could totally use the 5 elements spirit array to block this attack, but he didn't bear to. When fighting against Ji Tingyu earlier, he had already used the 5 elements spirit array to block the opponent's Scarlet Blood True Fire attack. After the 5 elements spirit array suffered a heavy blow, it needed a period of time to absorb the spirit energy of heaven and earth, and slowly recover. If he blocked this attack now again, it was very likely to cause damage to the spirit array. With Nye Tian's current attainments in spirit array, he still couldn't repair a rank 5 spirit array, so he didn't dare to use the 5 elements spirit array again. The defense of the rank 4 Soul King Yama armor was also not bad, and it barely took the combined attack. In addition, Nye Tian had the 9-star dragon vein physique, so this bit of injury was nothing to him. Next, it was time for Nye Tian to fight back. Boom! While everyone was still in a state of shock, Nye Tian made his move and slashed out with his sword. Like a flood dragon, an enormous sword shadow surged out of nowhere. "Get out of the way!" Someone reacted and roared. All the Danwu city guards were intimidated by the power of Nye Tian's sword, and all dodged. Nye Tian's sword missed, but the corner of his mouth curled into a strange smile. In the next instant, he stomped lightly, and his figure flashed, sprinting towards the figure whose eyes were locked on. "Save me!" Only now did Rui realize that Nye Tian's target was him. He screamed, but it was already too late. Nye Tian's figure rushed over, appearing next to Rui, and his pair of large hands were like eagle claws, locking the latter's throat. "You can't kill." Rui was lifted in midair by Nye Tian, and his hands were desperately trying to break free, but he couldn't loosen the iron hands that locked his neck. "Don't kill him." At this time, Elder Yang was the first to react, and he yelled, his face pale with fright. However, it was still a step too late. Crack! Nye Tian suddenly exerted force, and a crisp sound resounded in everyone's heart. Ingrue's head tilted and he died on the spot. Chapter 538. Ingrue's neck was broken by Nye Tian and the scene fell into dead silence once again. Countless gazes looked at Nye Tian, who was still holding onto Ingrue's body. Their eyes were filled with indescribable shock and horror. If they didn't see it with their own eyes, who would believe that there was really someone who dared to kill a rank 4 alchemist in the Alchemist Guild in front of everyone? This was the most blatant and direct provocation to the Alchemist Guild. Right now, everyone had the same thought in their hearts. Nye Tian was finished, completely finished. No matter who he was, he would have to bear the wrath of the Alchemist Guild. Even if he was the most talented disciple of the 4 aristocratic families, the Alchemist Guild would never allow him to live. Even if they had to start a war with the 4 aristocratic families, they had to let everyone see that the Alchemist Guild's dignity was not to be provoked. Old Yang's eyes were almost collapsing. He had never thought that Nye Tian would be insolent to this extent, even daring to kill a rank 4 Alchemist Guild. When Nye Tian killed the 2 elixir martial guards earlier, Old Yang was still fantasizing that with his identity, if he pleaded for Meng Fanchen on behalf of Nye Tian, perhaps the matter could be resolved. But now that Nye Tian killed a rank 4 Alchemist Guild, even if Old Yang's identity was special, he would definitely not be able to save Nye Tian. Meng Fanchen valued the Alchemist Guild's dignity the most. If anyone dared to provoke this dignity, he would absolutely not be merciful, no matter what the other party's identity was. Compared to everyone's shock, Nye Tian's expression could be said to be calm and collected. The corner of his mouth curled up slightly, and he even gave a disdainful smile. He directly threw Ingrue's body out like a dead dog, without a hint of panic. He really killed Master Ing. Until this moment, the 2 team leaders finally reacted. Their faces were lifeless and they were in a daze, still unable to believe the scene in front of them. If he's killed, then he's killed. Is there a need to make a fuss over nothing? Nye Tianling smiled coldly. The austere aura on his face sent chills down one's spine. Old Yang's expression was astonished. He could tell that Nye Tian wasn't the kind of person who did things recklessly and recklessly. There must be a reason why he dared to kill Ingrue in front of everyone. But what could the reason be? Brutally killing a 4th-tier alchemist was akin to slapping the Alchemist Association's face. Old Master Yang couldn't understand why Nye Tian was so fearless. What should we do? The 2 captains finally calmed down and did not dare to look at Nye Tian again. One of them asked while trembling, "You stop him. I'll go ring the Dan Marshall bell." The other person was relatively calm. He responded and jumped out of the hall. Dan Marshall bell. Hearing this name, the captain who spoke first froze for a few seconds. Old Yang was also stunned for a moment. He sighed in his heart. Ringing the Dan Marshall bell meant that this matter had become a big deal. The captain looked at Nye Tian with fear in his eyes. He didn't dare to take half a step forward, and he didn't dare to act recklessly. Just now, Nye Tian forcefully withstood the combined attack of dozens of Pill Martial Imperial Guards. This made him understand that the youth in front of him was not someone he could match. Nye Tianling suddenly turned around and glanced at the captain. The latter shuddered and subconsciously took a few steps back. "Don't worry. I won't leave. If I want to leave, you guys can't stop me." Nye Tian smiled indifferently. His tone was filled with disdain. He was right. If he wanted to leave now, these people in front of him couldn't stop him at all. "Old Master Yang, you guys leave first. I'll deal with things here and come find you guys soon." Nye Tian transmitted his voice to Old Master Yang. He didn't want the latter to get into unnecessary trouble because of him. Old Master Yang's eyes narrowed when he saw Nye Tian's confident look. Could it be that Nye Tian really had a heaven-defying identity that made him so fearless? After thinking for a moment, Old Master Yang decided to leave first. At least he had to make arrangements for Yang Zixiao. "Don't leave." He turned around and left with Yang Zixiao. A few Danwu Imperial Guards knew that they were with Nietian. They roared angrily and went forward to stop them. Nietian frowned and wanted to make a move. However, when he turned his head, he realized that there was no need to do so. "Get lost!" Old Master Yang roared. His seemingly old body suddenly emitted a huge force that repelled the Imperial Guards who were blocking the way. God wheel space. Nietian's heart trembled. Just now, Old Master Yang used the God wheel space. He really didn't expect him to be a God wheel realm warrior. God wheel realm warrior. Everyone's gaze froze and gasped. They didn't expect that this seemingly old man was actually a God wheel realm warrior. Even in Sumi Lingdu, God wheel realm warriors were rare. After all, in the entire 3,000 small worlds, there were only over 100 God wheel realm warriors on the surface. Old Master Yang was obviously merciful. Those Imperial Guards who were knocked away weren't injured. They got up from the ground and looked at Old Master Yang in a different way. They became fearful and didn't dare to take another step forward. Old Master Yang left directly. The dozens of Danwu Imperial Guards could only watch helplessly. Fortunately, Nietian didn't leave. He was the main culprit who slaughtered the rank 4 Elixir Refinement Master and Danwu Imperial Guards. As long as he was still here, it was enough. Nietian wasn't in a hurry. He looked indifferent and even had a smile on his face. At some point, he even walked over and picked up the spatial bag that Ingrue threw away. Inside were the herbs he needed. Moreover, all 6 herbs were there. Everyone stared blankly at Nietian, waiting to see how this show would end. Buzz! At this moment, a deep and distant bell chime suddenly sounded. It seemed to have the power to shatter the air. The sound lingered and lingered in the ears. This is the Danwu bell chime. When they heard this deafening sound, everyone's spirit was shaken. They instantly felt an indescribable excitement. Danwu bell chime? Nietian was slightly stunned. He didn't know what this meant. However, this bell chime was vigorous and made people excited. Danwu bell chime. It really sounded. That team leader was stunned and said in a daze. Once the Danwu bell rings, all the Danwu Hall's experts will swarm over. This matter is going to be huge. Someone exclaimed. Danwu bell was the taboo bell of the Alchemist Guild. Almost every big Alchemist Guild would have an Danwu bell. The Danwu bell would only be rung when the Alchemist Guild was in danger. Once it was rung, it meant that the entire Alchemist Guild would be on alert. Everyone who heard the bell would have to rush to the location of the bell. Buzz! Immediately after, the second bell chime sounded. It was deep and distant like the chirping of insects. However, it had an extraordinary magical power. It seemed to be able to stir people's hearts. It was like a sudden clap of thunder on a dry land, setting off a huge wave in the bottom of people's hearts. The second bell chime. The crowd exclaimed with a horrified expression. Buzz! However, in the next moment, another bell chime sounded. It was different from the previous 2. This bell chime sounded like a crane crying in the 9 heavens, shaking the heaven and earth. Chapter 539. The third clear and intense Dan Marshall bell chime rang out, and the formless sound waves spread in all directions. The entire Shumi spiritual capital felt a majestic and vast power. At this moment, the entire Sumi spiritual capital reacted. Everyone stopped in their tracks and looked up with bewildered expressions, not knowing what was happening. The first to react were the 7 branches of the Alchemist Guild in Sumi Lingdu. Countless tyrannical auras soared into the sky. Even the spirit wheel space of spirit wheel realm warriors appeared. All the figures streaked across the sky like bolts of lightning as they dashed towards the third branch. These were the powerful warriors of the Alchemist Guild. When they heard the bell, they immediately rushed to the place where the bell rang. At the city gate of Sumi spiritual capital, the guards at the gate heard the bell and immediately understood what was happening. They shouted, "Everyone, listen up! The Dan Marshall bell has rung. The entire Sumi spiritual capital is on alert. Seal the city gate." Don't let anyone walk out of Su-Mi's spiritual capital. Yes. The group of guards shouted in unison, their morale soaring like a rainbow. The huge city gate started to close slowly. Those who were still busy entering the city could only back out. The crowded caravan outside the city gate stretched for thousands of meters. It was the time for the once-in-a-decade Su-Mi Grand Meeting. What exactly happened to make Su-Mi's spiritual capital seal the city gate? The four major families of Su-Mi's spiritual capital also reacted at this moment. Mo family, a majestic mansion. In a deep courtyard, a gray-robed elder stood with furrowed brows. He murmured, "It's been 80 years. I heard the Dan Marshall bell ring again. What happened to the Alchemist Guild?" It had been 80 years since the last time the Dan Marshall bell rang. And the person who caused the Dan Marshall bell to ring last time was none other than Wild Blade Yi Linyun. Back then, he created Su-Mi's spiritual capital and challenged the people of the Dan Marshall Hall, forcing the Alchemist Guild to ring the Dan Marshall bell. But later on, he became friends with Meng Fanchen, who was still a red-robed elder back then. That was a story for the future. Mo Feng, the gray-robed elder called. Miraculously, his weak voice traveled thousands of meters. In the blink of an eye, Mo family's outer sect elder Mo Feng appeared in front of the gray-robed elder. With a respectful expression, he said, "First elder, I'll go take a look." The gray-robed elder was the first elder of the Mo clan, Mo Xing. His position in the Mo family was second only to the patriarch, Mo Zhaojing. No wonder Mo Feng was so respectful. Mo Feng did not die in the chaotic abyss. He and Qiu Xiaofeng, a direct descendant of the Qiu family, had escaped. Furthermore, they had also contacted the other vice pavilion master of the Ling Xian Heaven Pavilion. That was why they had survived until now. On the surface, he was still an outer sect elder of the Mo family, but in reality, he was a member of the Ling Xian Heaven Pavilion. "Go and come back quickly. Don't interfere," Mo Xing said indifferently before he disappeared. The ringing of the alchemy martial bell would definitely cause a huge commotion in the Sumeru spiritual capital. Before the matter was clarified, the Mo family would not interfere. "Yes," Mo Feng replied. His figure soared into the sky, heading toward the third branch. At the same time, the other three aristocratic families, the Tang, Gu, and Qiu families, also made their move. At this moment, within a small restaurant in Sumeru's spirit capital, a figure was tasting wine by himself, and he seemed to be at ease. The first two ringing of the alchemy martial bell didn't attract his attention. Perhaps a reckless idiot had angered someone from the Alchemist Guild, and someone had rung the alchemy martial bell. However, when the alchemy martial bell rang for the third time, this person spat out a mouthful of wine and laughed wildly. Could it be that someone is challenging someone from the Dan Marshall Hall? Let's go and take a look. Finishing his words, this person left behind dozens of supreme-grade essence crystals, which far exceeded the price of the wine. Then, his figure soared into the sky and directly pierced a huge hole in the restaurant. So, he left behind so many essence crystals to compensate for the roof of the restaurant. A tyrannical figure leaped out, and an ostentatious saber intent surged out. This figure was incomparably familiar. It was the world-defying wild saber, Yi Linyun. I, the wild saber, would like to see who is so audacious to actually dare to provoke the Alchemist Guild. Elder Yi laughed wildly, but a familiar face suddenly appeared in his mind. He murmured, "It can't be him, right?" For some reason, Nie Tian's face suddenly appeared in Elder Ye's mind. Elder Yi had just arrived at Su-Mi's spirit capital, and this trip was to visit Meng Fanchen. After the alchemy martial bell rang 3 times, the entire Su-Mi spirit capital entered a high alert state. Even the people walking on the street could feel the tense and oppressive atmosphere in the air. At this moment there were a few figures on the street that stopped on the spot. If Nie Tian was here, he would definitely be very excited because these people were the people he was most familiar with. Nieyuro, Jean Debao, Qiu Shan, Zhang Yifeng, Qiu Ling'er and the others. Not good. This is the alchemy martial bell. What exactly happened at the third branch? Zhang Yifeng looked towards the direction of the Alchemist Guild's third branch with burning eyes. He was very worried. Yifeng, should we go and take a look? Qiu Shan stepped forward and said. Jean Debao chuckled and said, It's good to go and watch the show. Nieyuro nodded and said in a crisp voice, Let's go. Maybe we can even meet Big Brother Nietian. Hearing her mention Nietian's name, Qiu Shan and the others' faces couldn't help but stiffen. Half a year ago, the news of Nietian's death had already spread to Heaven Luo City, but in order to not make Nieyuro sad, they didn't tell her the news. They only told her that Nietian was training and would be back soon. Moreover, Qiu Shan and the others still had a trace of hope that maybe Nietian didn't die in the chaotic abyss. Qiu Shan and the others had already been in Shumi's spirit capital for 2 months. They came with Gu Yi. Zhang Yifeng was now the alchemy genius of the Alchemist Guild's first branch and was seen as another rising star. Now they were temporarily staying with Gu Yi. Let's go and take a look. Zhang Yifeng finally nodded and looked back at Qiu Shan, telling him to protect everyone. After Qiu Shan obtained the Blade Dragon arm, his strength increased very quickly. He was now at the first level of true element and had condensed his blade intent. His true battle strength far surpassed other martial artists of the same level. Countless figures flocked towards the third branch. Everyone wanted to see who it was that dared to provoke the Alchemist Guild. At the same time, in the hall of the third branch, Nietian's expression became slightly serious. Although he didn't know what the 3 bell tolls meant, he could guess from the nervous expressions of the surrounding people that it must be the warning bell of the Alchemist Guild. It seemed that the true experts of the Alchemist Guild would arrive soon. Nietian didn't want to make things so big. Who knew that a 4th-ranked alchemist's life was so precious that it actually triggered the ringing of the alchemy martial bell. At this time, even if Nietian took out the Red Robe Order, it would be difficult to clean up the mess. But this was also good. This way, he could see Meng Fanchen. Nietian really wanted to meet this number 1 alchemist in the 3000 small world. Chapter 540. Such a strong aura. Nietian was slightly moved when he felt the aura of the person who came. The commander of the Elixir Martial Hall is here. Get out of the way quickly. The crowd was affected by the strong aura and quickly made way. In the next moment, a figure came from the sky and landed heavily on the ground. 2 deep pits were smashed on the bluestone slabs on the ground. Gravel flew everywhere. It couldn't withstand that person's aura and turned into stone powder. Divine Wheel Realm Expert. Before Nietian could see the person's face clearly, he already knew that this person must be a Divine Wheel Realm martial artist. Moreover, his aura was far stronger than a 1st-tier Divine Wheel Realm martial artist. He should be a 2nd-tier Divine Wheel Realm martial artist. However, Nietian suddenly felt a familiar aura from the person who came. He frowned, and when he saw the face in front of him clearly, he couldn't help but smile. Just now, he felt that the thunderous voice was inexplicably familiar. Turned out to be someone he knew. That commander's figure landed, and his eyes were focused on Ing Rui's corpse. His whole body was instantly filled with anger as he roared, "Who killed him?" That captain quickly walked over and pointed at Nietian. "7th Commander, it's this kid who killed Master Ing. Trash." That person waved his hand and directly sent the captain flying. His stern gaze locked onto Nietian. A terrifying aura pressed over from his whole body as he roared, "Kid, how dare you kill a 4th-tier elixir refinement master? Today, this commander will personally kill." Before he finished roaring, he suddenly saw the face in front of him clearly. His entire aura froze in midair, and his face instantly stiffened. He shouted in a daze, Nietian City Lord?" He was astonished and couldn't believe it. He even rubbed his eyes hard, wondering if he was dreaming. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth raised slightly, and he smiled faintly. Commander Zhao, long time no see. He also didn't expect that the first Elixir Martial Hall commander to arrive here was actually Zhao Kuo. That's right, this person was the 7th commander of the Dan Wu Hall, Zhao Kuo, who had once appeared at the Dragon Blood martial meet. Nie Tian remembered that half a year ago, Zhao Kuo was still at the first tier of the Divine Wheel and had been severely injured by Wei Yangzi of the Heaven Burial Guild. After not seeing him for half a year, this fellow was already at the 2nd tier of the Divine Wheel. His strength had improved significantly. It seemed that the 10 drops of dragon blood that Nie Tian had given him were not wasted. Zhao Kuo stood rooted to the ground for more than 10 seconds, unable to speak for a long time. Seventh commander? Do you know him? The captain couldn't help but ask when he saw Zhao Kuo in a daze. Zhao Kuo ignored him. She pinched herself hard and felt the pain. Only then did she know that she was not dreaming. She asked in astonishment, Nie Tian City Lord, aren't you dead? Nie Tian City Lord? Zhao Kuo's words stunned the crowd. Why did this title sound so familiar? Could it be Tian Luo City's governor Nie Tian? Someone exclaimed, and the shock in his eyes deepened. Tian Luo City's governor Nie Tian. Didn't he die in the chaotic abyss half a year ago? It seems that Tang 13 from the Tang clan also died in the chaotic abyss. Could it be that this young man is Tian Luo City's governor? The crowd discussed in astonishment. Half a year ago, when the chaotic abyss opened, it caused a huge commotion in the 3,000 small world. Nie Tian, as a nobody, died in the chaotic abyss. The news of him dying in the chaotic abyss spread quickly. Until now, people had almost forgotten this name. Who would have thought that this fellow would suddenly appear in Sumi spiritual capital and do such a shocking thing by directly killing a 4th-tier alchemist? Nie Tian stood on the spot with a calm expression and said directly, "That's right, I am Tian Luo City's governor, Nie Tian." "It's really him!" the crowd exclaimed, and their eyes widened as if they were looking at a monster. Tian Luo City's governor, Nie Tian, this was a legendary figure. Half a year ago, the Dragon Blood martial meet caused an uproar in the 3,000 small world. It was rumored that Nie Tian, with his giant spirit realm strength, defeated various geniuses and finally won the Dragon Blood Chief. His name spread throughout the 3,000 small world. Later, Nie Tian entered Chaos City and even had a conflict with the 4 big families. After that, he entered the chaotic abyss, but when the abyss closed, he did not come out. Everyone thought that Nie Tian and the others must have died in the chaotic abyss. But now, Nie Tian stood alive in front of everyone and even killed a 4th-tier alchemist. This kind of shock was indescribable. Nie Tian City Lord, mastering really killed you? After a while, Zhao Kuo calmed down and pointed to Yingrue's body on the ground and asked, "If Nie Tian really killed Yingrue, then even if he was Gu Yi's friend, he would not be able to escape death. Even if Zhao Kuo did not want to attack Nie Tian, he had to." "Yes, I killed him." Nie Tian nodded lightly and did not deny it. "You dare to admit it, very good." At this moment, another voice sounded, followed by 2 tyrannical auras, each aura not weaker than Zhao Kuo's. The 2 figures descended from the sky, and suddenly, a suffocating aura whistled out, pressing down on Nie Tian. So terrifying! The crowd was shocked. Their eyes focused on the 2 figures, and the shock on their faces deepened. These 2 figures were very burly, far taller than the average person, at least 2.5 meters tall. Standing in front of them, Zhao Kuo looked like a 7 or 8-year-old child. The 2 of them looked extremely ferocious. Their fiendish appearances gave off a strong sense of oppression. Facing the 2's aura pressure, Nie Tian's expression changed slightly, and he felt the space around him solidify. However, he did not panic, and with a calm face, he shouted in a low voice. An invisible force suddenly gushed out, and the surrounding space seemed to shake a little. A golden light surged out, and the invisible aura pressure was instantly dispersed. The two of them were slightly stunned, and they looked at Nie Tian with unconcealable surprise. Some people in the crowd saw the clues, and their faces stiffened. It was really strange that Nie Tian could disperse the combined aura pressure of two spirit wheel realm experts. "Kid, why do you have dragon chi on you?" One of the two burly men spoke coldly with a hint of killing intent in his eyes. These two were the third and fourth commanders of the Dan Wu Hall. They were brothers named Tai Shan and Tai He. Apart from being the commanders of the Dan Wu Hall, they were also the foster sons of the Dan Wu Hall master, Zhang Tingyin. Their appearance meant that Zhang Tingyin might have to make an appearance as well. The Dan Wu Hall master, Zhang Tingyin, was a name that was vaguely on par with Tang Hao, Mo Zhaojing, and Mo Zhaojing in the 3000 Small Worlds. Tai Shan sensed a powerful dragon aura from Nie Tian's body, which made him very surprised. Nie Tian used the dragon chi in his body to disperse the aura pressure of Tai Shan and Tai He. He was now a 9-star dragon vein physique, and his body could generate dragon chi on its own. Therefore, the dragon chi could be replenished every time it was used up. If it wasn't for the dragon chi, it would be very difficult for Nie Tian to disperse the aura pressure of the two. These two were stronger than Zhaoqua, and they were definitely above the third level of the spirit wheel. In front of them, Nie Tian had no way to retaliate. "This is my business, and it has nothing to do with you," Nie Tian replied indifferently and coldly. Tai Shan was slightly stunned and he said coldly, "Kid, you killed a Tier 4 alchemy master. No matter what your identity is, you must die today." Chapter 541. Nie Tian frowned slightly as he felt a chill spreading in the air. The two people in front of him wanted to kill him. Zhaoqua also revealed her murderous intent just now, but Nie Tian could feel that her anger was more obvious than her murderous intent. On the other hand, Tai Shan and Tai He were completely different. There was no anger in their bodies, only a strong murderous intent. From their eyes, it could be seen that they did not care about Ing Rui's death at all. They only wanted to kill Nie Tian. Nie Tian felt the inexplicable murderous intent and was puzzled. He had no grudges with the two people in front of him, and he had never even seen them before. Why did they suddenly want to kill him? Die. Just when Nie Tian was feeling puzzled, Tai Shan let out an angry roar. His killing intent enveloped Nie Tian like a solid substance. He struck out with his huge palm and an enormous aura filled the air. The terrifying strength of a warrior at the third tier of the Divine Wheel Realm was revealed. Everyone felt the space tighten, as if the air had frozen. Boom! The surging Yuanli condensed into a huge palm in the void, pressing down like a mountain. "Danger!" Zhaoqua shouted, her heart in her throat. Nie Tian sensed that something was wrong. Sweat immediately appeared on his forehead. He did not expect his opponent to be so determined to kill him. He did not even have a chance to speak and immediately attacked with a killing move. At this critical moment, Nie Tian remained calm. A golden light surged out of his body again. The dragon scale aura protected his body. At the same time, the 5 elements spiritual formation appeared. The terrifying power of the formation circulated and formed an invisible shield. Bang! With a muffled sound, the huge palm bombarded the 5 elements spiritual formation. The spiritual formation directly collapsed, and the power of the formation spread in the air. Nie Tian's figure flew backward and directly smashed into a huge stone pillar behind him. The huge stone pillar was smashed into a huge hole, and Nie Tian's figure could not be seen. Everyone turned to look at him with a shocked expression. The strength of a divine wheel realm warrior was still domineering. Just one palm was enough to make Nie Tian unable to withstand it. Immediately, dark red blood slowly flowed out from the stone pillar and dyed the ground red. This was obviously Nie Tian's blood. If he were to take on Mount Tai's palm head-on, he would definitely be in danger. Nie Tian City Lord! Zhaoqua reacted and shouted, but there was no response. If he took my palm head-on, he would definitely die, Tai Shan said coldly. His expression was much more relaxed, as if Nie Tian's death had made him feel a lot more relaxed. However, just as Tai Shan finished speaking, something strange happened. Bang! With an explosive sound, the huge stone pillar suddenly shook. Hiss! Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air and turned around in unison, looking over in shock. A blood-red figure suddenly leaped out from the stone pillar. It was Nie Tian. At this moment, time seemed to have stopped. Everyone was stunned. At this moment, Nie Tian's clothes were torn, and he was dripping with blood. It was almost impossible to tell that he was human. However, his aura was still powerful, and his eyes were still calm and proud. Everyone stared at him, shocked to the extreme. He did not die from the all-out attack of a level 3 divine wheel stage warrior. This is impossible. Tai Shan's eyes trembled and he said angrily, "You were hit by my palm, there is no way you can survive." He was very clear that even a divine wheel stage warrior would definitely die on the spot from that palm. Nie Tian was only at level 1 true element, how could he survive? However, the strange thing was that Nie Tian was still standing. Moreover, he only appeared to be seriously injured, but in fact, he was not seriously injured. Of course, in order to block Tai Shan's attack, Nie Tian had paid a heavy price. The 5 elements spiritual formation was smashed into pieces, and the dragon scale energy was used up. Fortunately, he had the 9-star dragon meridian's body. Otherwise, even if he did not die, he would have been seriously injured. The all-out attack of a level 3 divine wheel stage warrior was too terrifying. Even the 5 elements spiritual formation could not withstand it. If Yao Fei knew that Nie Tian destroyed the 5 elements spiritual formation in just a few days, he wondered what kind of expression he would have. Nie Tian's body shook, and a layer of blood was shaken off. His face became clearer, and he looked much better. He stared at Tai Shan and said cold, "Who asked you to kill me?" Nie Tian was not a fool. It was obvious that Tai Shan and he were here to kill him, and not because of Ying Rui's death. Ying Rui was just an excuse for them to attack. Nie Tian did not have any enmity with these two, so he concluded that these two were the knives to kill, and the one behind the scenes was the real culprit. Tai Shan was slightly stunned and his face stiffened. It was obvious that he had a guilty conscience. Nie Tian's guess was right. Tai Shan and he were indeed here to kill him. Tai Shan did not know who Nie Tian was, nor did he care who he was. He only knew that he could not disobey that person's words, and he must do it. Stinking brat, you publicly killed a rank 4 alchemist and challenged the dignity of the alchemist guild. You deserve to die. Tai Shan's face was so gloomy that it was almost dripping water, and the killing intent on his body flourished again. Everyone took a deep cold breath, and they all had astonished expressions. Could it be that Tai Shan was going to make another move? Even if Nie Tian did something wrong, Tai Shan was the commander of the Dan Martial Hall, and his strength and status were high. First, he pressured with his aura, then he brazenly made a move, and now he was going to make a move again and again. It made people feel weird. However, Tai Shan didn't care about the reaction of the crowd. It was still the same sentence, he must do what that person said. No matter what, Nie Tian must die today. Third Commander, it is true that Nie Tian City Lord killed Master Ying Rui, but this matter is not clear yet. It's not good for us to kill him directly. Zhao Kuo stood out and said nicely. Nie Tian was Gu Yi's friend, and Zhao Kuo remembered that he was also a rank 4 alchemist. It was obvious that they couldn't kill him directly. Moreover, this matter had already blown up and alarmed the entire Shumi spiritual capital. It didn't feel right to kill Nie Tian directly. Tai Shan glanced at Zhao Kuo coldly and didn't say anything. Zhao Kuo, big brother, and I know what to do. You don't have to worry about it. Tai Cold, who hadn't said anything, suddenly spoke. The killing intent on his body was even denser than Tai Shan's. His meaning was clear. He wanted Zhao Kuo to watch from the side and not interfere. Nie Tianling smiled coldly, and a smear of disdain flashed in his eyes. He said, "For you guys to be so obedient, it seems like the person behind you has a very high status." And? Tai Shan frowned. He didn't expect Nie Tian to be so smart, guessing the clues from the clues. In this case, there was no reason to let him live. "Big brother, let's attack together and kill him." Taiha's eyes flashed with cold light. He roared and his aura surged. He was about to attack in the next moment. Chapter 542. As the tyrannical figure descended, a terrifying blade intent bloomed. This blade intent was extremely domineering. Everyone's heart trembled as they felt a strong pressure. Their faces were filled with fear. What a strong aura! Everyone looked at the newcomer in panic. The newcomer's aura was even stronger than Tai Shan and Tai He. Just the blade intent alone was enough to make people lose their footing. Elder Yi. Nie Tian was overjoyed. The newcomer was none other than Yi Linyun. Benefactor. At the same time, Tai Shan and Tai He saw the newcomer's face. They were stunned for a moment before they reacted. They both knelt down and said respectfully, "Benefactor, please accept our brother's bow." Then, the two of them knelt and kowtowed to Elder Yi in front of everyone. Huh! Everyone was surprised. What was going on? Who was this person? Why did he make the Tai Shan and Tai He kneel? Benefactor. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. It seemed that Elder Yi had saved their lives before. Elder Yi glanced at Nie Tian and laughed. "Mr. Nie, it really is you." Before he came here, Nie Tian's face had inexplicably appeared in his mind. Who would have thought that when he came here, it was actually Nie Tian? Nie Tian smiled bitterly and said, "This time it's a bit troublesome." Ha! Elder Yi laughed wildly and said, "I, Killing Blade, am not afraid of trouble." Killing Blade? Hearing Elder Yi call himself Killing Blade, everyone was stunned. An older person suddenly remembered something and screamed, "Could he be the world-defying Blade Yi Linyun from 80 years ago?" The others also reacted and looked at Elder Yi with even more fear. 80 years ago, the name world-defying Blade resounded throughout Shumi's spirit capital. Even after such a long time, it was still exciting to hear it again. Old Man Yi looked at Tai Tai and Tai He and said indifferently, "Get up." The two stood up. Tai Shan frowned and asked, "Benefactor, what is the relationship between you and this young man?" Seeing Elder Ye's attitude, it was clear that he wanted to protect Nie Tian. This caused Tai Shan's expression to darken. Elder Yi didn't answer his question. He said directly, "Tai Shan, Taiha, since you call me benefactor, it means you still remember what happened in the past." Tai Shan and Tai He bowed at the same time and said solemnly, "Benefactor, we brothers will remember your kindness for the rest of our lives." "Okay." Elder Yi nodded and said, "I want to take Mr. Nie away. Is that okay?" "Benefactor, this." Taiha looked like he was in a dilemma. He wanted to say something, but he didn't dare to. "All right." Tai Shan thought for a moment and said loudly, "Our lives were given by you. Since you want to take them away, of course there is no problem." Elder Yi looked at the two of them and said, "I'll talk to Meng Fanchen and Zhang Tingyin personally. I won't make things difficult for you." "Thank you, benefactor." Tai Shan and Taiha nodded and expressed their gratitude. When everyone heard Elder Yi calling out Meng Fanchen and Zhang Tingyian's names, they were surprised again. These were the names of the president of the Alchemist Association and the hall master of the Dan Marshall Hall, and he actually called them out so openly. Elder Ye's identity was extraordinary. Nie Tian wanted to see Meng Fanchen and tell him about the Ling Xian Heaven Pavilion. Since Elder Yi was here, they could go see Meng Fanchen together. At this moment, outside of the guild hall, many martial artists had gathered. The members of the 4 major clans had all arrived. Mo Feng was also among them. When he saw Nie Tian's face, his face turned deathly pale with fright. He didn't expect that Nie Tian was still alive. The chaotic abyss had already been closed, and there was no news of Nye Tian and the others for half a year. Why did they suddenly appear again? Mo Feng couldn't understand. Most importantly, Nye Tian knew that he was already a member of the Ling Xian Heaven Pavilion. If he reported this to the Mo clan, he would be in a precarious situation. However, Mo Feng wasn't very afraid. Even if Nye Tian reported this, the Mo clan head might not believe him. If the Mo clan's elder was a member of the Ling Xian Heaven Pavilion, it would be a huge blow to the Mo clan's reputation. When they saw Nye Tian and Elder Yi walking out of the hall, everyone gave way. "Brother Yi, long time no see." Right at this moment, a voice suddenly echoed in the void. It brought along an extremely intense aura pressure that rolled over. Everyone felt a stifling sensation in their chest. Some couldn't withstand the heavy pressure and immediately vomited blood. In the void, a figure appeared and stood in midair. His entire body was circulating a terrifying aura like a mountain, giving off an intense pressure that nearly suffocated everyone. Such a powerful aura! Nye Tian looked at the person in midair and his heart shuddered. This person looked to be around 50 years old. He had a burly figure and sharp facial features. He gave off a very domineering feeling. More importantly, this person's aura was extremely powerful, far surpassing Tai Shan, Tai He and Elder Yi. Among all the people that Nye Tian had seen before, this person's aura was definitely the number one without a doubt. With such a powerful aura, this person's strength was vaguely at the peak of the Divine Wheel Realm. The peak of the Divine Wheel Realm was the pinnacle of the 3,000 Lesser World. Because this was a lower plane world, there were restrictions on the lower plane. No matter how heaven-defying one was, it was impossible for him to reach the Heaven Evolution Realm. There were probably only 3 people in Sumeru's spiritual capital who had such strength. Tang Clan Head Tang Hao, Mo Clan Head Mo Zhaojing, and Dan Martial Hall Master Zhang Tingyin. It was obviously impossible for Tang Hao and Mo Zhaojing to appear here. Therefore, the person who came could only be the Dan Martial Hall Master, Zhang Tingyin. The person who came had a faint smile on the corner of his mouth. He dispersed his aura and landed on the ground without making any sound. His control of the divine wheel space had already reached the pure azure realm. His gaze swept past Nye Tian and finally landed on Elder Yi. Elder Yi looked at the person who came and raised his brows. He smiled and said, "Zhang Tingyin, how have you been?" Zhang Tingyin. This person was indeed the Dan Martial Hall Master. When everyone heard this name, their eyes flashed with excitement and their expressions became agitated. The Dan Martial Hall Master was a pinnacle figure who could stand shoulder to shoulder with Tang Hao and Mo Zhaojing. They had always heard of this name, but how could they see it with their own eyes? Foster father. Tai Shan and Tai He took a step forward and greeted respectfully. When Nye Tian heard this form of address, his eyes trembled, and suspicion arose in his heart. Just now, Tai Shan and Tai He were bent on killing him. Could the mastermind be this Dan Martial Hall Master? Although this thought was ridiculous, Nye Tian secretly remembered it. The experience from his previous life told him that the more ridiculous a guess was, the closer it was to the truth. Hall Master. At this moment, Zhao Kuo also walked over and greeted respectfully. Zhang Tingyin only nodded indifferently as a response to the 3 of them. His gaze never left Elder Yi. He opened his mouth and said, "Brother Yi, it has been 60 years since we last met, right?" Chapter 543. When Elder Yi spoke to Zhang Tingyin, his tone was cold and harsh, which surprised everyone again. With Zhang Tingyin's status, he was on equal footing even when facing the 4 major clans' clan heads. Why did Elder Yi speak to him like this? "Brother Yi, this is the Alchemist Guild's matter. I don't think you need to intervene." Zhang Tingyin didn't get angry. Instead, he glanced at Nye Tian and said coldly, "He killed a Tier 4 alchemist of the association. If we just let him swagger off like this, where would the face of the Alchemist Association and the Dan Martial Hall be?" So, Brother Yi can't take this person away. Elder Yi was slightly stunned, but he immediately smiled and said, Zhang Tingyin, it's just a rank 4 alchemist, not a red-cloved elder. Why are you so agitated? With your high status, why would you suddenly appear for a rank 4 alchemist? Although it had just happened half an hour ago, it had already spread throughout the entire Sumi spiritual capital. According to Zhang Tingyian's status, he really shouldn't appear. Although a rank 4 alchemist died, any commander could settle it. There was no need for the hall master to show up. Brother Yi, are you hinting at something? Zhang Tingyin was a smart man. He obviously heard the hidden meaning in Elder Ye's words, but he didn't panic and asked directly. I'm not hinting at anything. It's just that someone has a guilty conscience, Elder Yi replied indifferently. Everyone else listened to the conversation between the two, but they were confused and didn't really understand. Zhang Tingyin nodded slightly and didn't want to waste his breath. He said cold, Brother Yi, I know your relationship with President Meng, but this person killed a rank 4 alchemist. If you want to protect him, even President Meng will be unhappy. I will explain to old Meng myself. You don't need to worry, Elder Yi said cold. Old Meng was how he addressed Meng Fanchen. Big brother Nye Tian. At this extremely tense moment, a crisp voice suddenly sounded. Then, a cute little girl ran out and ran towards Nye Tian. Ninth sister. When Nye Tian saw the face in front of him, he smiled happily and picked the little girl up. This little girl was none other than Yeyuro. Qiu Shan and the others arrived as well. The moment they saw Nye Tian, they were stunned. Although they had a sliver of hope that Nye Tian was still alive, they were still very shocked and surprised when they saw the latter. Boss, you really didn't die. Jean de Bao was the first to react. His fat body rushed over at an incredible speed and hugged Nye Tian tightly. However, in front of so many people, the scene of two men hugging each other was really not good to look at. Teacher! Zhang Yifeng also walked over and directly knelt on the ground. Nye Tian hurriedly gestured for him to stand up. The crowd was dumbfounded when they saw this. Sigh. Wasn't this Alchemist Guild First Branch's master Zhang Yifeng? Why is he kneeling in front of this young man? Someone recognized Zhang Yifeng and shouted as if he had seen a ghost. The others were even more stunned, not knowing what was going on. Mr. Nye. Big brother Nye Tian. Qiu Shan and Qiu Ling are also walked over. Both of them were much calmer. At this time, Jean de Bao looked at the situation around him and immediately understood. He cried out, F***CK boss. Don't tell me the person who caused the Dan Marshall bell to ring is you? Nye Tian shrugged slightly, expressing his helplessness. He also didn't expect things to turn out this way. At this moment, Qiu Shan suddenly saw Elder Yi and his gaze froze. Why did this person in front of him give him an inexplicable sense of familiarity and closeness? Moreover, the aura on his body was so familiar. Elder Yi also noticed Qiu Shan at the same time. His gaze trembled and his expression changed. However, he calmed down in the next moment and didn't say anything. At this moment, Qiu Shan suddenly realized that the old man in front of him was none other than his grandfather. Although Qiu Shan was only 4 years old when his grandfather left, he would never forget that back view. Now that they met again, he couldn't control his emotions. His knees went soft and he wanted to kneel down. However, at this moment, a pair of large hands held him up, preventing him from kneeling down. Elder Yi patted Qiu Shan's shoulder and transmitted his voice. Xiao Shan, let's talk about everything when we get back. His voice was low and it was difficult to conceal the trembling in it. It had been more than 40 years. How could Elder Yi not be excited to see his closest relative again? However, he knew that this wasn't the time. He had to leave this place first. Qiu Shan nodded heavily, but 2 streams of hot tears inadvertently flowed down his cheeks. Seeing the two like this, Nye Tian couldn't help but be slightly moved. Previously, he had only guessed that Elder Yi and Qiu Shan must have some kind of relationship, but now it seemed that this relationship was not ordinary. He unintentionally realized that Elder Yi and Qiu Shan's faces were somewhat similar, and their personalities were also quite similar. Nie Tian guessed that the two of them must be related by blood. Looking at the scene in front of him, Zhang Tingyin had a complicated look in his eyes. No one knew what he was thinking. Qiu Shan, all of you retreat first. Don't worry about what's happening here. Nie Tian said lightly and signaled Qiu Shan to bring Nie Yuro and the others back. Although Qiu Shan was currently at the first level of true element, the situation in front of him was obviously not something he could handle. As for Zhang Yifeng, he couldn't help much either. Elder Yi, I want to see President Meng Fanchen. As long as I see him, everything can be explained. Nie Tian knew that Elder Yi wasn't Zhang Tingyian's opponent. If the two of them really fought, he definitely wouldn't be able to get away with it. All right, Elder Yi replied. He also planned to see Meng Fanchen first. As long as he saw Meng Fanchen, no matter what, he could guarantee that Nie Tian wouldn't die. Zhang Tingyin, I want to see Elder Meng. Elder Yi didn't beat around the bush and said directly. Zhang Tingyian's eyes flashed and said, Brother Yi, it's not like 60 years ago anymore. President Meng isn't someone you can see just because you want to. Is that so? Elder Yi smiled playfully and a token appeared in his hand. He said indifferently, with just this, can I see him? Zhang Tingyin saw the token in Elder Ye's hand and his eyes trembled. He frowned and said, Why do you have the white robe token? White robe token. When everyone heard this name, their eyes lit up and they stared at the token in Elder Ye's hand. Who would have thought that Elder Yi would actually take out a white robe token? The white robe token was more authoritative than the red robe token. Only the white robe elders had the right to have the white robe token, and they could only have two of them. There was only one white robe elder in the Alchemist Guild, and that was President Meng Fanchen. There were only two white robe tokens in the entire 3,000 small worlds, and one of them was in Elder Ye's hand. Why do I have the white robe token? That's my problem. You only need to tell me that this is enough to see President Meng. The corner of Elder Ye's mouth curled up into a disdainful smile, as he said indifferently. Elder Ye's words were like a sudden clap of thunder, causing Zhang Tingyian's entire body to freeze. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd and the people from the four great families, if he didn't acknowledge the authority of the white robe token, it would be the same as slapping the Alchemist Guild's face. Chapter 544. Zhang Tingyian's cold eyes flashed across Nie Tian's body. Although it was only for a moment, the killing intent in his eyes was obvious. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed and he was even more certain of his guess. It must be Zhang Tingyin who wanted to kill him. Tai Shan and Tai River were just his killing weapons. However, he was very puzzled. He had never met Zhang Tingyin before, and Zhang Tingyian's status was terrifyingly high. Why would he want to kill him? Since he couldn't figure it out, Nie Tian put it aside for now. As long as he saw Meng Fanchen later and told him everything about Diao Jingde, killing Ying Rue would not only not be a mistake, but it would also be a merit. Yifeng, you guys go back first. I'll look for you after I settle things, Nie Tian said to Zhang Yifeng calmly. Master, be careful. Zhang Yifeng knew he couldn't help much, so he nodded and prepared to go back to the Alchemist Guild to wait. Big brother Nie Tian, you have to come back quickly. Xiao Guai has grown into a big guai. It misses you so much, Nie Yuro said to Nie Tian happily. Nie Tian smiled and nodded. He touched the little girl's face and left with Zhang Tingyin and the others. The crowd looked at their disappearing figures and still couldn't react for a long time. Who would have thought that today, not only would they see a legendary figure like frenzied saber Yi Linyun, but they would also see the Dan Wu Hall master. Even the legendary white-clothed token appeared. Such a good show was truly full of twists and turns. No one could guess the ending. At the same time, People were secretly guessing what would happen after Nye Tian and the others saw Meng Fanchen. No matter what the outcome was, even if Nye Tian died in the end, his name would resound throughout Sumi spiritual capital. At this moment, a figure secretly followed Nye Tian and the others and left. It was none other than Elder Yang. Moments later, Nye Tian caught sight of a huge, dazzling building in the distance. From afar, it looked like a huge, crystal-clear spiritual pill. This was the Sumi Spirit Capital's Alchemist Guild. Although it was built in the same style as the other alchemist guilds, it was even more majestic, solemn, and holy. Zhang Tingyin was leading the way. Nye Tian and Elder Yi were in the middle. Tai Shan, Tai He, Zhao Kuo, and the others were behind them. Beneath his feet was a path paved with precious stones. Even walking on it gave people a very luxurious feeling. Both sides of the road were heavily guarded, filled with martial artists in green robes, all of whom were at the 9th level of true element. And these were just the guards on the surface. In the dark, there would definitely be Dan Wu Imperial Guards guarding. Under this kind of tight security, it was almost impossible for ordinary people to get close to the Alchemist Association. Lord Hall Master, Guild Leader Meng is waiting in the inner hall. Please follow me. As soon as they stepped into the guild hall, an old man walked over and said calmly. His gaze swept across Nye Tian and Elder Yi, and he paid special attention to Elder Yi. He seemed to recognize him, but he didn't say anything. With such a big incident happening in the Alchemist Association, someone had already informed Meng Fanchen. It wasn't strange for him to be waiting in advance. You guys wait here. The old man who was leading the way waved his hand slightly. Tai Shan and the others all stopped, not daring to take another step forward. Following that, the old man only brought Nye Tian, Elder Yi, and Zhang Tingyin over. Under the old man's lead, Nye Tian and the others arrived at a small hall. The scene that entered his eyes made him slightly shocked. In the inner hall, a silver-haired man sat at the highest position. His eyes were calm, and there was no sadness or joy on his face. He was extremely indifferent. Below him sat 3 people. They were all old men in red robes. One of them was very familiar to Nye Tian. It was Gu Yi. Obviously, the silver-haired man sitting at the highest position was the Alchemist Association's guild leader, Meng Fanchen. The 6 people sitting below him were the 6 red-robed elders of the Alchemist Association. Originally, there were 7 red-robed elders in the Alchemist Association. Unfortunately, Diao Zhengde died in the chaotic abyss. Moreover, he was killed by Nye Tian. Looking at the lineup in front of him, the guild leader and the red-robed elders were all here. It seemed like they were going to put Nye Tian on trial. Nye Tian looked at Meng Fanchen. This was an old man with sharp eyes. Although he had a head full of silver hair, he didn't look old at all. His expression was extremely calm, kind, and domineering at the same time. Nye Tian had seen countless people. He could guess most of them with just one look. However, he couldn't see through Meng Fanchen at all. He had no idea what he was thinking. Please. The old man gestured for Nye Tian and the others to enter. Elder Yi didn't stand on ceremony and was the first to enter. Nye Tian and Zhang Tingyin followed closely behind. Elder Yi walked over and was about to say something, but he was interrupted by Meng Fanchen. The latter smiled faintly and said, Ling Yun, this is the Alchemist Association's matter. You just have to watch from the side. Elder Ye's face sank slightly, but he still retreated to the side and found a seat to sit down. Zhang Tingyin also retreated to the side. He was from the Dan Marshall Hall, and the Dan Marshall Hall was a subsidiary organization of the Alchemist Association. Therefore, his real position was below the red-robed elders. Right now, he could only watch from the side. Nye Tian had a calm expression and wasn't nervous at all. He glanced at everyone and suddenly saw Gu Yi. The latter's brows were furrowed deeply, and he had a helpless expression. Originally, Gu Yi was very happy when he heard that Nye Tian was still alive. However, when he heard that Nye Tian publicly killed a rank 4 alchemist, his face turned green. He immediately received the notice and rushed here. Fortunately, the Summer Grand Meeting was about to begin. Otherwise, it would be impossible to gather all the red-robed elders at once. Gu Yi had a helpless expression on his face, and was complaining in his heart. He said, Nye Tian, Nye Tian, you really don't have any time to rest. You just came out from the chaotic abyss and you immediately caused such a huge commotion. You simply won't stop until you flip the entire Sumeru Spirit City upside down. Although he didn't know why Nye Tian killed Ing Rue, Gu Yi knew that Ing Rue was a young genius of the Alchemist Association and was the focus of the association's nurturing. Moreover, he was the disciple of another red-robed elder. Nye Tian killed him and made it known to everyone in the Sumeru Spirit City. If there wasn't an explanation for this matter, the Alchemist Association's face would be completely thrown to the ground. All the important figures of the Alchemist Association are here. Very good. Nye Tian smiled faintly. There wasn't a hint of nervousness on his face. When the few red-robed elders saw his reaction, their faces were abnormally ugly, and they all revealed anger. Arrogant disciple, you're still so arrogant even after coming here. Do you think that the Alchemist Association is so easy to offend? One of the slightly plump, red-robed elders was enraged. He stood up abruptly and pointed at Nye Tian as he reprimanded. This person was called Lien Wenchu. The Ing Rue that Nye Tian killed was his direct disciple. That was why he was more furious than anyone else. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly and he said with a stern face, This master, you can talk nonsense but you can't talk nonsense. I'm also a rank 4 alchemist of the Alchemist Association. Why would I want to offend the Alchemist Association? Isn't this making things difficult for myself?